If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61, Buffalo Hunt, 3. First POV. I could feel my back muscles rippling and wringing out every last bit of strength to hold the buffalo in place. The moment my jaw clamped down on his face, the beast jerked his head in one powerful movement. In doing so, he was barely able to protect his remaining eye from my rows of sharp teeth. You. Impossible. The buffalo bellowed in a deep voice as he was unable to lift me off the ground. He was a different kind of monster when he was still fresh, but after tiring out, he could not ragdoll me as easily as he did before. My claws dug further into his skin and my teeth were starting to tear at his face. The sounds he made were like he had a storm inside his throat. The intake of his breath was rough and needy, and his exhalation sounded like the roar of a broken engine. Under the searing heat of the savannah, both of us were tired and overheating. But the bigger beast was having a much more difficult time than me. I readjusted my jaw, slowly making my way down along his rectangular face. I was already biting below his eyes, and climbing up would require my jaw to release its hold entirely, so I shifted my target instead. My back leg was planted on the ground, refusing to yield to the movement of the buffalo. I was resisting every little twitch and movement he made, and I was also using my body weight to weigh him down. All of this was to make sure that the beast remained tired and never got to catch his breath. With my front paws holding him in place, I quickly released the crushing pressure of my jaw so that I could move downward and clamp down on the nose of the buffalo. Since I was not able to kill the buffalo due to his thick hide, my next intention was to kill him by suffocation. So I blocked his airway with my mouth. Animals could not easily switch between the nose and mouth for breathing, so the effect was immediate. The buffalo reacted fiercely to my attempt at suffocating. He jerked his head up, and this time he was able to move me with his sheer strength. He was not able to lift me off the ground, so he drove me forward again instead. His hooves pounded heavily on the ground. He stomped on my back paws while he stamped forward. I increased the pressure of my jaw as I gritted in pain. This then led to the buffalo struggling even harder than before. It was a never-ending chain where we riled each other up every moment of the fight. We wrestled like that for a while. He was doing his best to try and shrug me off from his body while I did everything to hold on. When driving forward did not work, he tried spinning and twisting his body. When that didn't work, he pinned me on the ground and tried to crush me between his head and the ground. But I was able to bear all the damage inflicted on me. My body, forged through hardships and training, did not betray me when the time came. My muscles were not for show as they worked and chained together to resist the living strength which was the buffalo. And not just that, I was getting better and better at fighting the buffalo as the seconds ticked. I was developing a technique in real time. A technique for taking down buffalo. Although the bull was huge and powerful, the force he generated was mostly just linear. If you knew how to utilize balance and control the force, it was much easier to deal with the bull. Think of a matador. A weak human could make a clown show out of a raging bull through superior technique. But as time stretched, the buffalo was starting to enter his final stage of life. It was at this moment that a sudden surge of strength overpowered me. His body seemed to realize that it was at the risk of dying, so it gave him access to every fiber of his muscles for one final struggle before death. At least that's how I explain the sudden surge of power in my head. The buffalo tore his face out of my jaw just like that. But the consequence of such a violent escape was that my fangs scraped a line on his face. The soft tissue on his nose looked like it had been chewed on. It looked like a flower of flesh at the end of his face. The bull released a shriek of pain while looking towards the sky. He was also taking in much needed air, so I took that moment to quickly reposition myself. I got an idea when he stomped on my feet. I never really considered it before, but the legs should be a great weakness for a beast that weighs as heavy as a buffalo. It was dangerous to go for the back leg since I risked being kicked to death, so I went for the front leg. While the bull was wincing from pain, I released my claws from his shoulder and quickly pulled away before diving right back at his legs. My jaw easily found one of the legs and I clamped down on the bone right above the hoof. I was surprised by how effortlessly I was able to destroy the leg. Buffaloes, even with their massive weight, had surprisingly skinny legs. There was barely any muscle or skin to protect the area right above the hoof. I could literally feel the tendons and ligaments snapping due to my bite. The buffalo immediately buckled at the injured leg. But right before he fell, he was able to hook his curved horn at my underbelly. My loose skin worked to protect me from tearing and penetration, but I was lifted off the ground and tossed aside by raw strength. And yet there was no follow-up to the attack. As the saying goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The buffalo was not able to support its own weight with only 3 legs, so he fell to the ground. He crashed sideways so his underbelly was exposed completely. His own size became a curse at that moment as he could not right himself up. He became a victim of his own weight and momentum. And what else was I supposed to do when the buffalo exposed his vulnerable parts to me? I attacked the underbelly like a savage beast. My teeth and my claws were able to tear the tight skin with ease. Perhaps it was due to the heat of the battle and the adrenaline, the buffalo bled a fountain from every cut I make. The blood sprayed on me and bathed me red. The intense smell of the flesh and the taste of blood made me release a beastly roar, and I increased my effort. My prey bellowed and cried in his place. His deep, stretching howl sounded haunting as it echoed through the savannah. The final voice of a dying life was distinct to the ear. But the buffalo did not cry for long. He soon died from the blood loss and the injury. Yet I did not stop at any point. Instead, I immediately started eating my food while it was warm. I gained access to the inside, and like is tradition, I first feasted on the organs. Chapter 62, Reflection and Growth with Every Experience. First POV. You did it. Grim said as he flew down. He did not land beside me like he usually did, and instead was at a good distance away from me. This was because I was showing an unusual level of aggression and possessiveness while I feasted on the organs of the buffalo. A rumbling growl came from my throat, and my body language warned everyone from approaching. It was instinctual. It felt right to act that way. I had earned this meal through blood and sweat. No creature in this world had a stake in this meal. It was for me to decide, and it was for me to consume. It was bloody fucking mine. After eating up the organs, which were much bigger and juicier than what I was used to, I pulled back to get a breath of fresh air. The inside of the buffalo was hot and stuffy, so much so that the dry air felt refreshing when I pulled out. I saw vultures circling in the sky. They had only been a few while I was hunting, but now, nearly 24 filled the sky, and their number was only increasing. Was there ever any doubt? I asked while gazing at the sky. There were doubts at the beginning. I lacked belief in myself and didn't think for one moment that I would be able to bring down a full-grown buffalo by myself with ease. But in the aftermath of the victory, all those doubts seem like a distant memory. A distant, stupid memory that you no longer even associate with yourself. Not anymore, Grim answered with a twitch of his exposed head. I smiled. I sat there and took a moment to relax after the initial feast. A cool breeze blew on me. The sticky blood upon my body worked like a cooling mud, and I savored the sensation. The hunt did not reward me with just a meal but also experience. I thought back upon the battle and started realizing where I went wrong and what I should have done instead. First of all, my plan of drawing away the buffalo and tiring it out before the start of the real hunt was genius. Endurance was one of the few attributes I had over the buffalo, and I exploited it fully in this battle. Unfortunately, the plan had its limits. At one point, the buffalo got tired of chasing me, and he would just stand and watch me from a distance without moving a single muscle. It was at this stage that I had to confront the beast, whether I liked it or not. Now here was where I went wrong. Instead of having a badass face-off with distance between us, I should have closed the gap between us even before the buffalo realized it. The buffalo gained power and momentum when given time to charge at me. Instead of putting distance and risking my life with one dodge, I should have never allowed him to have distance or time. I was not strong enough to face the buffalo when he was given time to charge. But if we were both close to each other, I could wrestle with him. Giving a bull time to gather momentum was a stupid move on my part. One other thing I should have done was lead the buffalo to a place that I scouted beforehand. This will give me a great advantage. Perhaps it could be a sloping ground where it would be easier to push the bull off balance. Or a place with obstacles where I can shield myself or hide behind when the bull was charging straight at me. There was also the weakness of the buffalo that I discovered. The legs and the front two in particular were a glaring weakness for the buffalo due to his immense weight. Along with the nose and the eye. I thought I would have difficulty attacking the face, but when you are at such close contact, the horn was not as scary as it looked. The idea here was to glue myself to the buffalo so that it would not have the range to utilize his horns. Such thoughts continue to pass through my mind. The next time I went buffalo hunting, I would do so with a little more ease and technique. The ease with which I could take down a buffalo would only increase with each hunt from then on, until eventually I will make the Black Death a staple source of my diet. Afternoon. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon. What used to be a golden ball of light in the sky was now a depressing orange. The world was not too bright, but it was still not dark either. It was that time of the day when the day and night were having a tug of war to claim dominion over the world. The sensation I felt the most at that moment was the ache in my jaw. It was not an ache from an injury but from chewing tough meat for hours. I had developed the habit of chewing my meat thoroughly over the years. This was mainly to aid my digestion since I eat much more than any lion should. It makes my digestion easier and faster, which in turn leads me to eat more food. Another reason why I developed the habit was to train my jaw muscles. Lions were among one of those predators that had a surprisingly weak bite force when taking into account their size. Other big cats like leopards, tigers, and jaguars all had a stronger bite force than a lion. This was because lions evolved to hunt bigger prey. Their jaw developed to tear and penetrate through muscles and grip them tightly. It was not really logical to have a bone-crushing bite in that case since big prey had thick muscles and skin, so you would not break their bone regardless. It was also because they are one of the most successful predators and do not have to eat things such as bones. They can live by eating the organs and full meat instead. Anyway, that was beside the point. Our evolution may decide that a lion did not need a powerful bite force, but I was not going to be a pussy and let the smaller cats have the stronger bite force. I trained, and as it stands right now, I doubt any other big cats have a stronger bite force than me. I did not do it often, but I could crush bones with a fight. You really think I would sleep well knowing fucking hyenas had a stronger bite force than me? Nah. There were other parts of me that ached beside my jaw. In fact, it would be easier to point out the parts of my body that did not hurt instead of listing those that hurt. My head and inside did not hurt. That was about it. The rest of my body was aching. It was not extreme, but it was there. My muscles were trembling and some parts of my body ached with each of my heartbeat. It was the kind of pain that promised ruthless fatigue the next morning. I might not have spilled blood, but that didn't mean I came out of the hunt unscratched. I was sure there was nothing broken, but my body was going to show the consequences of taking on a beast 4 times my size. Okay, that's enough, I said to myself, because if I didn't, my greedy ass would eat until I popped like a balloon. A 1,000 kilogram prey was much more different than the 70 kilograms impala that I was used to eating. I have eaten to my utmost limit and the carcass looked untouched. There were barely a few chunks missing in one side of the buffalo, and that was about it. I finally stopped feeding and propped myself up from my lying position. When I sat upright, I was able to see the animals that had completely surrounded me while I was eating. I had been eating for a few hours now, and during that time, the smell of the carcass had attracted much. There were wild dogs numbering in the hundreds, and they stood a great distance away from me. The dogs learned fast and knew to avoid me from our previous encounters. They were far enough to look small in the distance, but still close enough to come and scavenge the carcass the moment I left. The black vultures also filled the land. They stood patiently, standing much closer to me than the wild dogs dared to. I saw some fights break out over the place in their imaginary line. There were dozens more flying overhead, waiting patiently to eat my fill. I also spotted other types of vultures among them. A few jackals lay cautiously here and there, along with a few warthogs who, interestingly enough, will eat meat if given the chance. There were other animals as well, which I could not make out but were among the others. Was one of them a baboon? I wasn't sure. And finally hyenas. They did not appear in my field of vision, but I could smell that they were not far away. It was the dry season and food was scarce. A big kill like the buffalo was literally a summoning of any predators in the Serengeti region. I took a moment to look all around me. I was oddly pleased that I was the only one with a full belly among all these predators, and they did not dare approach me even though hunger was gnawing at them. They waited in line like good little subjects. But just as I was thinking that, the sound of something small growling angrily entered my ears. I looked around to find the source, but I couldn't find it. So I stood up and walked around the carcass. It was then that I saw a honey badger violently tugging at the thick hide of the buffalo. His small jaw was trying its best to tear at the thick skin, but he was failing cartoonishly. In frustration, he made angry killing sounds that would have been quite scary had it not been for its rodent size. I chuckled seeing that. You could literally feel the black Air Force energy coming from the small creature. Anyway, I got down and picked up the honey badger between my jaws. My teeth crushed him at his midsection, completely immobilizing him so that he could not fight back. He screamed painful sounds and thrashed around violently, but I ignored that and walked away. I left the carcass in the dust and headed towards my home. Grim had already had his fill since he was the only one who could feed at the same time as me. Like a lower-ranking member of the Pride, he took to the sky and scouted the areas before I reached them. If there were any dangers, he would warn me immediately. The eventful day came to an end with my victory. In my return, I glanced at the well-hidden research vehicle among the bushes and hoped that they had got everything perfectly. I hoped I looked good in their camera. Chapter 63, Joe Rogan Podcast. Warning, this is mostly filler, basically no chapter since only the end is kinda important. But I hope you still read it. Ironically the longest chapter I've written. Third POV. The Joe Rogan Podcast. In Austin, Texas, the recording for a new episode of the Joe Rogan Experience was underway. The Joe Rogan Podcast, often referred to as the Joe Rogan Experience, was the most popular podcast in the world. Known for its diverse range of guests ranging from scientists and philosophers to fighters, comedians, and survivalists, the podcast has become a cultural phenomenon. Its long-form, unfiltered conversations held a significant impact among the masses, often shaping public discourse and sparking debates across social media and news outlets alike. On this episode, Joe was joined by Forrest Galante, a wildlife biologist, adventurer, and television host best known for tracking and rediscovering species once thought to be extinct. The two had already been deep in conversation for over an hour, diving into wild field stories, rare animal encounters, and the brutal realities of nature. And right now, the conversation has turned into a debate. The topic being who would win in a fight. A lion or a tiger? I don't know, dude. I think a tiger fucks up a lion every single day of the week. I mean, they are stronger, bigger, have a stronger bite force, and unlike a lion where the females do all the hunting, a male tiger will actually go out and hunt its own prey, Joe Rogan said, a stubborn edge hid along his smile. The tiger is the real king of the jungle. It's a literal killing machine, lions don't stand a chance. Forrest Galante mirrored the stubbornness in his otherwise friendly smile. He scratched the back of his head while thinking up a reply. That's a classic take, Joe. I get it, tigers are huge, live solitary, and they have tons and tons of story that adds to their reputation. But I think in a realistic scenario where a lion and a tiger encounter each other, the tiger runs away 9 times out of 10, Forrest said boldly. He continued, maybe if you have a way to somehow reprogram their minds so that they will fight to the death, maybe then the tiger will win the fight. But that will not be realistic, will it? You are a fighter, you should know. It's not just about size and strength in a fight. There are other attributes such as aggression, experience, and pride. People say lion heart, they never say a tiger heart. Joe Rogan wet his lips and stared at the ceiling like he usually does when he is thinking. That's a good point. But considering the difference in their build and the fact that a tiger hunts its own food, I think a tiger will still really fuck up a lion. I've seen a few videos where a lion and a tiger fight, and in almost all of them, the tiger has an upper hand. A male lion can also hunt, Joe, Forrest said. I'm sure they can. I've seen them hunt buffalo and wildebeest, but in those cases, they hunt them together. What I meant was that in a pride, the male will rarely go out to hunt and it is the female that does most of the hunting. The male's job is to protect the pride when another male comes to take over the pride, Joe said before leaning back in his chair. That is such a common misconception, dude. Such a common misconception. People really think lions are like the father who lazes around reading a newspaper and only works on very rare occasions, Forrest said while shaking his head. I mean, is that not kind of true? Joe asked with a raised eyebrow. Absolutely not. Absolutely not, Joe. First of all, people assume that male lions are gifted the pride when they reach adulthood or something. That is simply not the case. In fact, most lions die or spend their whole life without ever getting a pride. A lion has to fight tooth and nail for its own pride. Forrest explained. He continued while leaning towards the microphone to make sure the whole world heard him so that the misconception could be destroyed. First of all, lions are kicked out of the pride when they are 18 to 24 months old. From then on, they have to hunt for their own food by themselves. On rare occasions, the lions will form a coalition and the group of bachelors will hunt together. But even if they have to hunt alone, they will do it. This is why the male lions are observed to be even better hunters than the females, Forrest said. Really? Joe said. Yes. They can live perfectly fine without having pride. Instead, it's actually the females who need the males. Imagine if the concept of pride never existed, the females would not stand a chance against the stronger males. They will be killed on sight, be chased out of their territories, and even if they manage to have a successful hunt, a stronger male will come and steal the food. So basically, the females use the males to protect themselves from other males, if that makes sense, Forrest said. Ah, okay. That makes sense, yes, Joe said while bobbing his head up and down. Joe was the type of person who rarely feels bad when he is proven ignorant. It was one of the main reasons why his podcast reached as far as it did. He represents the average man who is not all-knowing but has an open mind to learn new things. Okay, so going back to the main topic. Lions fight, and they fight a lot. From the time they hit their sexual maturity, they are brawling. They fight for dominance, territory, mating rights, etc. They spend up to 5 or 6 years living and fighting until eventually they become the king of the pride. And believe me, Joe, when a lion becomes king, it means he is a bad motherfucker who has been in more fights than 10 tigers combined. And it doesn't end there, the lion has to constantly fight off the new challenges to keep his pride, Forrest said. Joe Rogan listened carefully with narrowed eyes. He hummed and nodded in acknowledgement. It's why they don't hunt. What if new challengers come right when he is tired of hunting? What if he got injured from one of his hunts? The lion always has to be in perfect condition to fight. And the savannah is filled with other predators that are looking to steal the prey that they kill, most notably the hyenas. The lion is then responsible for protecting the kill from these scavengers again, Forrest said, and finally stopped his rant with an awkward smile. So you think all this fighting experience will translate to a factor that will win them the fight against a tiger? Joe asked. Forrest replied, 100%. Look, the lions grow up fighting and they literally evolve to fight other lions. Even their mane are not just for looks, they evolved to have manes to protect their vital parts from bites and claws. But what about the videos? We have footage of a lion fighting against a tiger, Joe asked once more. This time he had a sly smile as if to say, got you on that one. Probably those lions are in captivity, or they are lion males that do not have the experience, which I said will give them an edge in a fight with a tiger. I'm talking about lion kings here. Forrest said with a nod. Joe Rogan mirrored the knob, but before he could say anything else, Forrest continued. And regardless of that context, the videos you mentioned are too short. They are only brief confrontations. Lions will have the edge when it comes to a drawn-out fight to the death. They have better endurance when it comes to fighting, and they will be much harder to kill and damage the vitals. The tiger probably just goes full force at the beginning of the fight like an untrained fighter, whereas the lion has been in fights and knows the importance of conserving energy, and as the fight stretches, the lion will have much better chances than the tiger, Forrest said. Okay, so you think that a lion will fuck up a tiger? Joe asked to summarize all his rant. I do not think that either one will fuck up each other. It will be a close fight, but I think lions in a realistic encounter and condition will win over the tigers. Forrest said, finalizing his standpoint and opinion. Definitely. I think that too after everything that you said. But opposite to you, I think tigers will still have the upper hand, Joe said with his signature grin. Forrest shrugged with a grin of his own, fair enough. Now speaking of lions and tigers. Why do you think one is called the king of the jungle and the other is not? I mean, do lions even live in the jungle? Joe asked again. Well, the saying that lions are the king of the jungle goes way back. When we say this term today, we think of modern lions, but that is just not the case. For example, lions are already considered the king of animals and associated with power and nobility as early as 3000 BCE in the Mesopotamian civilization, Forrest said. Joe Rogan hummed to indicate that he was intrigued and listening closely. And we have to know that during those times, lions did live in the jungle. Well, they still do even now, at least some of them. And the lions that live in these jungles are also much bigger than even the African lions. There is also the fact that lions during that time were much bigger. For example, the Barbary lions went extinct, I think in 1950, something. And they were much, much bigger than their African counterpart. There are also the Cape lions, cave lions, etc., all bigger than modern lions, Forrest said. So the lions during those times will actually beat the tigers of today even in size and power? Joe asked, returning back to the topic that Forrest thought they had left behind. I don't know. Considering that tigers have not shrunk as much as lions did over the centuries, maybe yes. But at the very least, the lions back then would have been equal to today's tigers, Forrest said. Okay, Joe said and folded his arms. So I guess what I am saying is that the saying is not wrong by all means. It is not some propaganda spread by people who like lions. The saying was true during their time, but has been getting outdated with the dying of certain lion species, Forrest said. I see. I also understand why people will look at lions and consider them the king of the jungle. I mean, they are majestic with their mane and the pride that they rule over. The solitary tiger cannot compare to the sight of this noble beast overseeing the whole territory with its females and cubs, ruling over the land and all, Joe said. Yes, Forrest nodded in agreement. But the tigers are also majestic and beautiful in their own way. They are nature's perfect killing machine. If lions are king, then the tigers are badass assassins, you know, Joe added. Also true, yes, Forrest said. The two of them leaned back in their own chair. Forrest took the water from the table and took in huge gulps to quench his dry throat. After seemingly coming to an end to the debate, they were ready to start another conversation. Joe, as the host, was the first to start another conversation. Okay, since we are already in the lion and size territory, I wanna ask you a question. Go on, Forrest said while closing the cap of the water bottle and setting it back on the table. Did you ever hear about that place in Africa where the river broke off in a different direction and made this area an island? They said the lions that live there only had the buffaloes to eat and hunt. So the lions have grown much bigger and stronger than other lions. Some of the female lions are as big as the average male lions in other areas. Have you ever heard about this place? Joe asked. Yes. I think the island is called the Duba Island. And yes, like you mentioned, the lions there have grown bigger and developed more muscles over the years to adapt to their environment, Forrest said and then continued. I think they even changed their whole hunting style and strategy. They would hunt for hours in order to bring the buffalo down and attack it during the day in the swamps and all that, he said with a nod. Isn't that crazy? Joe asked with an expectant smile. Yeah. Definitely amazing, Forrest said, trying but failing spectacularly to act impressed. Joe hummed, his smile faded and he tilted his head curiously. What's with that reaction? You don't think that it's incredible that these animals can grow so strong and adapt to their environment? Oh, definitely. Don't get me wrong, it's mind-blowing. But the Duba Island have been known for a while now. I think they even made a documentary about it called Relentless Enemies. It's a known thing, not enough to blow my mind considering the mind-shattering discoveries we made recently, Forrest said. Joe immediately smelled the hidden message, mind-shattering discovery recently. What's that about? Well, Forrest began with a smile on his face. It was the kind of smile that was holding back a lot of excitement. It's similar to the Duba Island case but on steroids. It involved a buffalo too recently, it's ridiculous to be honest, Forrest said. So what's holding you back? Come on, tell me, Joe probed, excited. I am not completely sure whether they would like me to share about this in front of the whole world, Forrest said. Oh, that was the only word that left Joe's mouth but his face said a lot. He needed to know what all of this was about. As much as he needed to talk about bears in every podcast. Wait, let me, Forrest said and took out his phone and started typing some things on it. Joe waited patiently for a while as Forrest made a phone call after sending what looked like multiple messages. Forrest left the table to talk on the phone. The secretive nature of the news made Joe even more excited about what Forrest had to say. What was this discovery that he spoke of and why was it so important? Jamie, what do you think? He asked with a smile. You think it's some kind of discovery? A discovery of a lion species thought to be extinct. He asked and the two talked for a while. And then after a few minutes, Forrest returned and he did so with a wide smile on his face. That spelled good news for Joe and the rest of the world. Well? Joe asked. They said it's okay. And they even sent me some pictures and footage that I can show you, Forrest said, his chill guy vibe breaking to make way for an excited fanboy kid. He passed the phone to Jamie who connected the phone to the big screen in the studio before passing it back to Forrest. A few months ago a friend of mine, who is a cameraman for a research team in Serengeti, called me up to talk about this new lion that they discovered recently. Basically, they wanted to know if the lion has ancient DNA in him, like a Barbary lion or a cave lion. Forrest started while fiddling on his phone and searching for the best picture to show to Joe Rogan and the world. So the researchers in the Serengeti discovered this lion 7 months ago. They called him Leo, and I'm not gonna say anything more. Just look at this image, Forrest said and made a final tap on his phone before he looked towards the big screen. Joe, Jamie, and even the staff who worked on the set all looked towards the screen. The moment the image came up, you could hear a collective gasp from every single person in the studio. Joe Rogan made the face. His eyes were widened and his eyebrows nearly shot off his bald head. His mouth was agape to make a surprised girlish sound. It was an expression he made only when people talked about gigantic bears like polar bears or Kodiak bears. "What in the fuck is that thing?" was his only words. But they were the only words needed by the entire studio. Chapter 64, Joe Rogan Podcast, 2. Third POV. Joe Rogan Podcast. What in the fuck is that thing? Joe spoke for the entire room as he said that. On the other hand, Forrest was smiling ear to ear as he looked at the shocked expression of everyone in the room. There was a long pause before Joe spoke again. "Is that even real?" On the screen was a picture of Leo. In the image, Leo was simply walking through the savannah. But the picture was taken at the perfect moment, where his muscles were flexed and visible under the loose layer of skin. It was rare to get such a clear picture of Leo in the wild since the researchers almost never got close to him. They had more videos of him than a perfect picture like the one displayed on screen. "That is 100% real, Joe," Forrest said, his voice had a grin. "No." Joe drawled in disbelief, "No, Nat. It can't be. It has to be edited, right?" He glanced at Jamie, the fraud checker of the show. Jamie had no words, he merely gawked at the image the same way as everyone did. His mind was contemplating whether it was edited or not. The details of the picture said it was not edited, but the image as a whole looked unreal. Like something abstract given physical form. Forrest chuckled, the picture came straight from the researchers, Joe. There is zero editing involved. You really think I will pull up some half-baked pictures on your show? Look at all those muscles, my god, Joe said, he's like Hercules. Oh yeah. Look at the shoulders, look at the paws, Forrest said. Why is he like that? That doesn't look like a lion. He looks, Joe narrowed his eyes, he looks more like a big mountain lion. Like I said, that is a real lion living in the Serengeti region. A rogue without a pride. The researchers called him Leo. My friend told me it's a way to affirm his identity as a lion since he didn't exactly look like one anymore, Forrest mentioned. Leo literally means lion. No, he still looks like a lion. But he looked like a roided up version. You know what I mean? Joe said with a laugh. How big is he? They estimate him to be around 250 kilograms, which is around 600 pounds give or take, Forrest said. Jesus, that is almost 4 of me, Joe said and laughed nervously. He looked around at the studio, that is a cat the size of 4 of me. The staff in the studio and even Forrest himself chuckled for a while. The single picture already had a huge impact on everyone. What would the reaction be when he showed everything else? The thought made Forrest rub his hands in expectation. Joe cleared his throat and processed the existence that was Leo. After that, he asked, so what is he? Some kind of animal experiment? Did the scientist in all their wisdom decide to give a shitload of steroids to one of the most powerful predator? Joe was showing teeth. It honestly wouldn't surprise him if the scientist did just that. It sounds about right given their history. No, it's natural. And it's precisely because of that he blows everyone's mind. Forrest said. But how is that possible? Like I said, hypertrophic adaptation. It is similar to the Duba lions where the animal successfully adapted to their environment and shortcomings to survive. Forrest said. The lion you see has no tail but it has adapted to perform despite that. Wait, really? Joe Rogan looked back at the image on the screen. Perhaps the muscles had stolen his attention completely that he missed the missing tail. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that Leo's body has adapted and therefore the lack of a long tail did not look out of place at all. Perhaps it was a bit of both. Joe scrunched his brows as he looked at the short tail of the lion. Forrest saw his struggle and so he changed the image on the screen. The next image was that of Leo, but it was taken from the side to show his full length and lack of a long tail. Joe Rogan gasped. It was an audible, exaggerated gasp that has become a habit over the years as an entertainer. Being a podcaster means learning to express your emotions fully for the viewers. Oh fuck, he said, running his hand through invisible hair. Holy shit, that looks crazy. Yeah. So what happens is that they believe Leo lost his tail while he was just a small cub and his body has adapted around that disability as he grows older. Very much like how the Duba lions grow bigger and stronger due to having to hunt down buffalo, Forrest said. Man, that is crazy to look at. I'm looking at him and you just told me the reason but my mind is still like, how? Joe said, now he was rubbing his bald head. Nature man, it's crazy. It finds a way to survive, always do, and always will, Forrest added. But still, even with the explanation of hypertrophic adaptation, the researchers cannot answer why it is that extreme and why it happens so fast. Also, they don't understand why he keeps growing and keeps getting bigger, Forrest said, one of the reasons why they are still out there, trying to find answers. That is just incredible, Joe said. A short silence followed as they just nodded at each other and digested the information. Joe clicked his tongue and cleared his throat before speaking again, and you say they contacted you because they want to know if he has ancient DNA. Yeah, they did. They did, Forrest began and adjusted himself on the chair briefly. It was difficult at first because they couldn't dart him to extract blood or DNA. Wait, what do you mean? They can't shoot him? Is darting illegal? Joe asked. No. My friend said they even called a ranger with a license to dart Leo. They just can't physically do it to him. Leo is already very cautious towards the humans. He is not like other animals that get used to the presence of humans. Even the research team will stay at the very edge of the horizon to study him and use cameras with zooming lenses or drones, Forrest said. But luckily, Leo has a somewhat permanent home. They got some blood and fur samples from there and sent them to me, he said. And then I sent these samples again to labs and genetic experts that I know. They can look at the DNA from furs. Joe asked. Yes. If the fur has roots, it's possible, Forrest answered. But why send them to you? Why don't they just send them to labs directly? Joe asked. Because of budgeting issues. My friend said they get funds, but studying Leo and tracking him cost a lot. Especially since they have to use drones a lot, since he didn't allow them to be too close. And DNA testing costs quite a bit, especially when it's looking for ancient DNA. There are also international issues. You actually need a permit to send biological samples like this across borders in some places, and I just happened to be the guy they knew who could do all these. So they called me, Forrest answered. That's interesting, Joe nodded and adjusted himself on his seat. Then he asked the vital question. So did you find anything? Any ancient DNA on the lion? Joe asked, expectation dripping from his tone and face. Forrest chuckled nervously while grabbing his shirt. Well. Go on, Joe urged. Okay, so in the beginning, we were expecting some kind of cave lion DNA, or perhaps Barbary lion DNA considering they became extinct only a while ago. But we found none of that. None. Leo has zero heritage from these ancient species, Forrest said to the disappointment of Joe. In the end, we came to the conclusion that Leo has a different, unique combination of DNA compared to other lions and perhaps a mutation. We will need a more advanced DNA testing lab where we can analyze the entire DNA sequence in a better sample to prove this theory. If that is true though, we may very could be witnessing the emergence of a unique subspecies of lions, Forrest said. Okay. So what you are saying is that Leo doesn't have a unique bloodline in him but instead he could be the start of a unique bloodline entirely, Joe asked. Pretty much, the guest replied. Dude, that is metal as fuck, Joe Rogan said and then laughed. That might just be even cooler than having ancient DNA in him. Imagine being the father and ancestor to these new, giant, and muscular lions in the savannah. Yeah, definitely, Forrest shrugged with a nod. Now look at this, Forrest said and finally changed the image on the screen to a video. It was a very rough and blurry video taken from a phone. The actual footage was not allowed to be leaked out just yet so the researchers had sent him a short video of Leo hunting down a buffalo. Oh ha. Joe Rogan increasingly loses his mind as the video played. The video covered the end of the hunt, where Leo was facing the buffalo in a fight to the death. Is that a Cape buffalo? Is that really a Cape buffalo? Joe asked in complete astonishment. Not just a Cape buffalo, that is a fully grown male. It has no injuries before this whatsoever, so what you are watching is a lion taking down a healthy, prime male buffalo by itself. Forrest said, replying to the questions beforehand. Joe did not reply, he couldn't. Seeing two behemoths of animals fighting each other to the death was basically a dream come true for him. Look at that, look at him. The lion knows how to wrestle, and it's attacking the eyes. It's targeting the eyes. Joe said. They all watched in bated breath as Leo came out victorious in the battle. The hunt was successful and the apex predator dug into his food immediately. My God, he really killed it, Joe said, this time both hands clutched his bald head. The motherfucker really killed the buffalo. What takes a whole pride to take down, this lion did it by himself. Holy shit! Holy shit! Joe looked around. Holy shit! That moment in the podcast went viral. This caused the whole episode to be one of the most popular and most viewed in the whole JRE podcast. The moment in specific was taken out in the form of shorts, and that too went viral among the masses that normally did not watch the JRE. The images and the video was posted on their IG page as well for others to share and watch. This was the very first time the world had heard of Leo. It was the first step towards his global stardom. Comment section. @Mohit_0812. Dude killed a full-grown Cape buffalo solo? That's the LeBron James of predators. Fire fire. 21k likes. @great_mate_oni. This is what happens when nature min-maxes its stats. Skull flexed biceps. 13.5k likes. @red550. The hypertrophy adaptation is real, but that is stretching logic to a whole new level. Reality truly is often stranger than fiction. Holy shit. 28.1k likes. @MD_Rizvi. Leo is who my cat thinks he is, pouting cat face. 77.3k likes. @TrueImmortalDevil. This is the UFO sightings all over again. Blurry videos and people believe anything. 1.4k likes, 1.1k replies. @ABSSod862. He has no tail but outmuscles every other lion? That sounds like comic book logic. 4.3k likes. @Caro_. That's Mike Tyson for the Lions and you can't change my mind. 79.3k likes. @Mono_Monday. Joe Rogan rubbing his head every 3 seconds like he's trying to summon Leo. Loudly crying face with tears of joy. 37.9k likes. @JadeZ1. Rest in peace to that buffalo. Bro clocked into work and ran into the secret boss. Loudly crying face. 44.4 likes. @PETABoytoy. I feel like the lion is definitely being experimented on. He does not look normal at all. 1.3k likes. @Quinn Bland. I don't even watch wildlife stuff, but this gave me chills. Nature is metal. 7.9k likes. @shape_matters69. Working in a zoo has me laughing with sunshine and rainbows. Meanwhile, nature just straight up evolves a monster like this. 349 likes. @PetaDildo. Why is no one talking about how disturbing it is to celebrate a lion mauling another animal? 23 likes. @RealAnimalLover. I hope this doesn't turn into one of those stories where humans start tracking him 24/7 and ruin his life. Let him be. 23k likes. @Big Cripping. If I was a lioness. Face without mouth. 1k likes. @Ozarist replied, don't you dare finish that sentence, lil bro. 1k likes. @Lord Cad. They say Leo was born with full mane. 4k likes. @Tarlock. Bro skipped everything and maxed strength. 6k likes. Chapter 65, New Lion. First POV. 1 month later. After taking down my first buffalo, I took nearly 5 days off due to the sheer volume of the food I ate and because of the fatigue I got after the hunt. Although I suffered barely any outer injuries, inside I was quite a mess. I guess I even tore some of my muscles in my sheer effort during the hunt. Not to mention the internal injuries I suffered from being used like a plow by the buffalo. But after 5 days of rest, I was ready to hunt once more, and hunt I did. My second hunt was much easier than the first since I knew what to expect. The bachelors that I targeted were also much smaller than the one I took down, so I was able to succeed without much trouble. It didn't mean it was easy though, not by a long shot. My life was still very much at risk and the buffalo was still much stronger than me. Every time I hunt, it's a gamble. It's just that they are so stupid and arrogant. If the hunt was a gamble, then I was playing poker with kindergarten. They had the strength of a buffalo but also the brain of one. They would chase after me without a care for their stamina, and tiring them out like that was not a challenge at all. I would slowly lead them away from the herd and towards a place I scouted beforehand. The place where I led them had many obstacles and the terrain was much more advantageous for me. By the time we reached there, the buffalo was exhausted at best and he became the helpless victim to the real hunt. At this point the risk on my part had plummeted dramatically as the buffalo did not even have enough strength to hurt me. My third and fourth hunts were successful as well. I get better and more efficient every single time I hunt. My strategies improved, my instincts sharpened and my confidence soared. But then reality hit and unfortunately, I failed for the first time on my 5th hunt. The main reason for my failure was the relationship between the bachelors. The herd I hunted at that time was smaller than usual, there were 16 members in total, with only 2 bachelors. The 2 males had some kind of brotherhood between them, which was unlike what I've witnessed before where the males were rivals. They both insisted on chasing after me. I continued with my strategy of trying to lead them away from the herd, but neither one of them wanted to leave the other. They worked together as a team and that was my downfall. Hunting 1 buffalo was one thing, but hunting 2 at the same time was another. The situation shifted from a gamble to a death sentence for me. I was not nearly prideful or egoistical enough to continue trying. But even that failure was just a learning experience. I learned to avoid small herds and learned to observe the relationship between the bachelors before I started my hunt. When there were more than 2 males in the herd, it probably meant they were a viable target. You could also tell how close they were from their body language if you looked for details. A whole month quickly passed by like so. I spent my time learning, training and hunting. At this point, I was quite confident in my skills. I was a certified giant slayer. I hunt down 2 buffalo a week on average. Although there were times when Grim spotted impalas or antelopes, so I hunt them too on rare occasions. It was nice to get a different flavor of meat every once in a while. These smaller prey had a much lighter taste to them compared to the buffalo, which tasted heavy and reeked of musk. The difference was akin to a steak and chicken, but with an even wider difference gap. Speak of the devil, I said when I finally saw a small herd of buffalo in the distance. Right now, I was in the middle of hunting a buffalo once more. The sun was at its height in the sky, it was the middle of noon. The heat bothered me, but I knew it would bother the buffalo even more, which is why I hunted during this time of the day. It had not been an hour since I set out for the hunt, but we had already found a herd. The population of the buffalo was tens of thousands in this region alone, so it was quite easy to find a herd. I slowed down my pace before coming to a stop when I was not too far away from the herd. Right then, Grim flew down and landed beside me. He flapped his wings in that manner where I knew he was pleased with himself, and he had good information. So? I asked. This herd is smaller than the one we hunted last time. 21 of them in total. 7 are females, 5 are calves, 6 subadults, and 3 bachelors, Grim said. He added after a pause, there are a few animals in the area, a couple of warthogs and 3 giraffes. Nothing to worry about, though. The designated place is also clear. At this point, not only me but Grim had gotten well and efficient with his role in the buffalo hunting. He was very pleased these days since the spoils were plentiful. He did not show this much enthusiasm while hunting other animals. Which made no sense, by the way, since his appetite was limited. It was his greedy nature that was pleased when we hunted buffalo. Well done, I said before getting up. Always a pleasure to serve you, the vulture replied. The bachelors were spread as far away from each other as possible on the edge of the herd. That was a clear sign that there was no brotherhood and the bachelors were at odds with each other. A grin spread across my lips and displayed fangs. I strode towards the herd like a king picking his meal. That quickly got the attention of the herd and one bachelor came to protect the herd. It was a young bull, not big enough to weigh a ton. His overwhelming aggression at my simple approach hinted at his lack of wisdom that one gets through age. This one wouldn't get away. Got you, I said and growled. The bull charged almost immediately. Slash 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 slash. Half an hour later. Contrary to expectation, a young and inexperienced bull did not mean an easier hunt. In fact, fighting these young aggressive bulls was riskier than hunting older ones. To put it in simple terms, a young bull was more likely to kill me, but the older bull was more likely to escape and survive. Now, why am I mentioning this? How much further? I asked the vulture flying overhead. I was full on sprinting and have done so for a whole minute now. Which was rare. The reason? An enraged bull was right behind me. He was likely enraged by the fact that I had just blinded him in both eyes. Although buffalo rely on sight to find their target would react to movement, they use much of their other sense to locate their target as well. It's why they were able to charge at you while having their heads down. After I took his eyes, I did not move away far enough to exploit the weakness. And now the bull was charging at me without a care in the world. He would probably collapse soon due to sheer exhaustion, but he no longer cared about that. His only goal was to kill the one who took his eyes. Almost there. Grim replied from above. I gritted my teeth and increased my effort. I was getting tired as well. Had it not been for my training I would have stopped a while ago. But after almost 10 seconds of springing, I finally saw the thing that I was looking for. A slope. I led the bull towards the slope, and the moment we reached the change in terrain, the bull finally slipped and he had a mighty tumble. A slope was already bad for a buffalo with eyes, but for a blind on, it was a death sentence. His front hooves extended more than he should and I heard the sound of bones breaking immediately. I moved to the side to dodge the falling giant. His butt was lifted off the ground and he rolled down on the slide. The earth was torn apart by the sheer force and weight. The heart opened up and a big cloud of dust came to life. I remained in place, panting while I watched the bull fall to his death. Or maybe not, I said when I heard loud screams of agony coming from the packle. The buffalo crashed. I took a few more seconds to catch my breath before I walked down to the buffalo. He could not even move anymore. His limbs were twisted in weird ways and his horn was also broken from the fall. He trashed around in his own skin. I watched him suffer for a few more seconds as his screams slowly dwindled down to painful whispers. And finally, confident that he would not attack back anymore, I ended his misery by biting his neck. After killing him, I took a short break to catch my breath. Then I began eating on the spot. Another thing about hunting buffalo was that you could not drag them away after killing them. There was no way of moving a carcass weighing nearly a ton. You had to eat them where they fell. The vultures circled overhead. They started small, 6 of them at first. By the time I got to the liver of my prey, their numbers tripled and now there were 18 or so vultures in the sky. I did not bother counting after that. I feasted on my kill while the rest of the animals waited. From vultures, wild dogs, and foxes, they knew their place and waited until I was done. But then one creature stepped out of line. He announced his presence with a thunderous roar. Roar. It was not just a sound. It was a command, a show of dominance and a declaration of authority forged into the vibration of ego. Not once. Not twice. But multiple times. Roar. 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 It was not afternoon yet. Meaning it could not have been a simple patrolling of the Bailai brothers. The lion making that sound was coming straight for me, those roars were meant for me. But at the same time, it was not one of the Bailai brothers. I was certain of that. The roar was not deep or thundering like Baraka's, it was not sharp and tearing like Makalai, nor was it calm and commanding like Roku's. Grim, who was perched on top of the buffalo carcass, looked towards the direction from which the sound came. He stared for a while before he burst into action and flew towards that direction. In that moment, I pulled my head out from the inside of the buffalo and stared in the direction as well. A new lion, I muttered to myself. A rogue like me. Chapter 66, First Blood. First POV. I knew there were other Rouges like me in the region. How could there not be? The territory that the Bailai brothers ruled spanned far and wide. Their kingdom was so vast that even the Pride lands would pale in comparison. But I have never encountered another rogue so far, which was not surprising considering I've been here for only 7 months or so. In the rare instances that I caught their scent, I turned the other way and left them to be dealt with by the 3 brothers. I couldn't do that now. The rogue lion was heading straight towards me. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he was heading straight for the buffalo that I just took down. Roar. My ears twitched as I analyzed the sound of the roar. One could tell much about a lion just from his roar. But this one in particular was hard to tell and understand. The roar held power, no doubt. The lion was full-grown and healthy. There was a sense of command and authority in the roar, but it felt forced, like the lion was trying to prove himself or something. My ears twitched again in wonder. The best comparison was looking at an unfinished painting. There were colors, paints, and shapes but none yet refined. In the end, I determined that the rogue was exceptionally young. Right then, Grim flew back from a distance. He landed in front of me with a gust of wind. I could tell from his eyes that something displeased him greatly. It is a rogue male with a dark mane. He is alone, no other lion for miles, Grim said. His neck twisted in a force of habit. Is he big? I asked. Average, he answered without missing a beat. An average-sized lion was approaching me by himself. I could not force myself to be concerned about that. It was precisely because of how unthreatening it was that Grim was displeased. If you were going to interrupt the feeding time, at least send Baraka or Hulk. I lowered my head to continue eating my food. The roar in the distance quieted down when the lion was close enough to smell, because that meant the rogue was smelling me too. The smell of the carcass overpowered the smell of the lone male for me, so he went unnoticed for a while. He was probably stalking and observing me. I hoped he would leave after seeing me. But I gravely underestimated the arrogance and the recklessness of a young lion. Despite seeing my size and despite seeing that I probably took down the buffalo alone, he still approached me. And not in a timid way, mind you. He strolled towards me like he owned the land. I growled while eating. The vibration was strong enough to travel through the ground. It was a clear warning that he was not welcome here. But the rogue ignored any warnings and continued walking. At that point, I looked up from the carcass to lock eyes with him. Mind sharing? He asked as his pace slowed down. I stared for a while and answered, yes. I very much mind sharing my kill. As it stands, Grim was the only creature that I shared my meal with. The rest of the vultures, including other animals, had to wait until I had my complete fill and abandoned the carcass. Well, that's too bad, he said, I didn't want to kill you. Grim, who was perched on top of the buffalo, turned towards the rogue and froze right then and there. I was very much the same, caught off guard by the sheer audacity. Kill me? Young blood, do you realize I took down this buffalo alone? I asked in return. Maybe, but that only makes you weak, he replied with confidence, the kill is fresh and warm. I know you expended all your energy to take down the bull. You likely suffer injuries as well. Is that why you remain there, hiding behind the carcass instead of confronting me? You are tired and injured and you don't want to show it, he added, just leave while I still give you the chance. That was actually a smart deduction if I were being honest. It sounded like something I would do. Attack a lion after he hunted a big prey, expending most of his strength and possibly suffering injuries. What better time to strike, right? Grim and I shared a look at each other, somewhat intrigued. What is your name? I asked. Mbaro, he answered, but that is irrelevant. Leave now, I am getting impatient. Mbaro was a strong name, which made me wonder if he was also a descendant of Mbalai like the Mbalai brothers. Perhaps he was a grandson? I could tell that Mbaro was one of those rare lions that had the smarts to thrive. Perhaps he would be someone like Roku. But unfortunately, fate brought him to me. Now the lion circled around me. His tail tensed and swaggered with each step, his ears were facing me and his eyes never left mine, as if entering a staring contest where the one to look away first submits to the other. A low chain of growls left his throat. He shook his head to puff out his mane, and he stood tall with his chest out and prideful. Meanwhile, I was looking at his display of dominance with an increasing level of anger and annoyance. What he was doing was the closest thing to trash talk for lions. He scraped his paws on the ground, displaying his long and sharp claws. It was at this moment that I had had enough. I stood up and stepped over the carcass before heading towards him with slow, deliberate steps. In that moment, it finally clicked in his mind how big I was in comparison to him. I would say he was around 180 to 190 kilograms. He was smaller than Roku. On the other hand, I had gone beyond 250 kilograms. His gaze moved away, losing the staring contest in the process. He took a look at my body and musculature. He took in the sheer space that I occupied with my presence. He looked at my width, my huge paws and my mane, which was easily 2 times bigger and darker than his. I came slowly and absolutely. Like the flow time that will eventually bring you death. If he were as smart as I think he is, it was about time he realized he fuck up badly. But pride won over logic. Ego suppressed intelligence as the lion continued baring his teeth and actually took a step to close the distance faster instead of running away. That set off the fuse. I exploded into action. There was no mercy in my attack. I had every intention of tearing him into shreds. The goal was not to chase him away or even kill him. I wanted to hurt him. A punishment fitting for his insolence. The lion roared and charged at me before folding like cardboard when we clashed. The strength difference between us was honestly ridiculous. Perhaps the gap was as much as the buffalo and me. His intelligence went out the window the moment we fought, proving that strategizing while fighting was something unique to me. He was full of aggression, driven by instinct. He reminded me of Macaulay in this regard. On the other hand, the same could be said for me, but not for the same reason. Every attack I decided to throw worked. I did not have to plan for shit. If I wanted to claw him, I did. If I wanted to bite him, I did. If I wanted to pin him down, I did. He was simply no match. I mauled him for a few seconds. I strike his face with my paws and my claws tear down lines across his face. His eyes were badly damaged in the process. He was not experienced enough to dodge like the Bailey brothers. I opened my jaw and bit his neck. His mane got in the way, but I clamped down hard and pulled a chunk of his mane. Then I attacked the same spot once more to get a better bite. The chain of growls turned into fearful whispers. His pride was swallowed by fear. I tore off his mane and he can't do the same. After doing it a few times, I really liked tearing off his mane. It felt like I was stripping away his pride and dignity. So I continued doing it. His claws came up to try and claw me. But how could he do damage where the horns of a buffalo failed? His bite did not even reach my skin due to my mane. My thick and loose hide did not even have to protect me. He was inexperienced. Not only was I able to overpower him physically, but also technically. It was like a trained fighter against an untrained woman. After a minute of continuous mauling, he managed to slip out of my grasp. His mane was messed up and half bald. Blood dripped off his body and he bolted off faster than he ever did in his life. "Get over here!" I roared and exploded right behind him. I caught up almost immediately, and I clamped down on his tail. I stopped and he also stopped. Then I used my legs to exert power and tug at the tail as hard as I could. His body slid right back to where I wanted him, which was under me. I pushed him down from his back. He struggled like a house cat when you tried to carry him forcefully. A flurry of limbs and trashing around that was ultimately futile, other than some scratches. "This is the difference between pride and arrogance," I said behind his ear before I opened my jaw wide and clamped down on the back of his skull. The front skull was one of the toughest bones in the body, but the back of the skull was much more fragile than that. My tired jaw was still able to exert enough pressure to crush the skull. I heard a nasty crunch and the lion froze before his body trembled and spasmed. It was the soul leaving the body. I pulled back with a bit of surprise. I was not expecting to kill him that easily. I licked my lips and tasted the blood of my own kind. It tasted wrong and horrible, but that did not stop my heart from exploding with a sense of euphoria. Was it wrong to like killing my own kind? The lion was weak and took barely any effort to kill. But the sense of pride and euphoria was comparable to that of killing a buffalo. Was that a part of biology? Was that how lions evolved? Were we meant to kill each other like this until only the strongest survive? Questions after questions, but I embraced the beast. I was all the same. It was my first time killing another lion and I found out I kind of liked it. The consequences of that were still unknown. I roared in victory over the dead body. Then I dragged the dead lion back to the buffalo carcass. I dropped it right beside me as a kind of trophy and warning. Then I resumed my feast. Chapter 67, Time Skip, 3. Third POV. 3 months later. 3 years old. The long dry season lasts 4 months in the Serengeti. 4 long and hot months where the ground cracked open like old skin and the air was filled with dust. The sun felt burning in this time of the year, with the grass turning yellow and brittle. The trees stood bare and rivers shrank to leave behind muddy swamps and dead silence. But the ruthless season was slowly coming to an end. It started raining again a month ago. It was not frequent or pouring, but the rain brought much needed moisture to the dry region. The thirsty land soaked in every drop of rain and life was slowly returning back in the Serengeti. The terrains shed their yellow straws and new life, the color of green, sprouted where the dead once stood. The bare trees were also sprouting new leaves. Vegetation and vines were slowly covering their nakedness again in a beautiful dress of green. After a month had passed, the land had gone through a complete rebirth. The Serengeti was ready to support life once more. The grassy plains were begging herds to come and graze. But none came yet. For the herds had not returned from their migration to the northern Masai Mara region. Although I knew from Grimm and the gossip in the air that the thousands of herds were slowly making their way back to the Serengeti. So basically, every life in the Serengeti was in the middle of transitioning from the ruthless dry season back to the wet season, where resources were plentiful. It was akin to witnessing hell turning into heaven. My eyes fluttered open when irritated by direct sunlight. I tensed my relaxed muscles to push myself above the tall grasses where I slept. A long and wide yawn escaped my jaws. I took a look at my surroundings while I shook off the remnants of sleep on my body. I was in an open plain where tall grasses grew. The place was slightly damp from the early dew, but coupled with the heat of the sun, it made for a cozy place to sleep. A few weeks ago, I left my home in the kopje. I did this because of the buffalo, which were my main source of food at this point. The wet season was beginning, which means that the buffalo did not need to scatter in small herds anymore. As the lands turned green with vegetation, the splintered herds were slowly regrouping again to form a bigger herd. A herd that would number in the thousands. Every buffalo was moving to the north. According to Grimm, they were heading to the main channel of the Mara River. This place had the biggest source of water and food, so the buffalo gathered here to regroup in other years as well. But as the buffalo moved towards the main channel of the Mara River, they were moving further and further away from my home. It was at this point that I decided to leave my home in favor of following my prey. That did not mean I was abandoning my copy though. I would return in a later date when the herds came back from their migration and I could hunt other prey. But at the moment, I need to follow my protein. I heard a flutter of feathers behind me. I did not react as it was routine at this point. Good morning, Grimm. Good morning, my lord, Grimm answered. Any news? I asked while stretching my body like a cat. Like I said before, strength was good but not at the cost of my agility or flexibility. I was not a bear but a cat. No matter how big or muscular I get, I need to maintain my nature as a cat because cats are the perfect natural design of what a predator should be. The zebra herds had made it to the Mara River. The crocodiles are awakening from their slumber and sharpening their teeth. The great crossing of the river is underway, Grimm said. I hummed in acknowledgement. The Mara River was a vital part of our ecosystem and it was also a river that separates the Serengeti and the Masai Mara. During the dry season, the herds had no trouble crossing this river as it was small and had barely any water. But as the rain fell and the herds were coming back from their migration, the river swelled up and increased in size. What used to be a small stream during the dry season had become a raging river that could drown a full-grown wildebeest upon their return. I'm sure I've seen videos of this crossing back in my past life. I have never seen it before but I could already picture it in my mind. On other news, the Mbalai brothers fought off their 7th challenger this month, Grimm said. They've been getting so many challengers recently, I commented. Well, of course, the end of the dry season is the time when most rogues will challenge the kings. The dry season takes its toll on every creature, including the kings. They are in their weakest state right now since it's been a long 4 months and the herds have not yet reached central Serengeti for them to hunt and regain their strength, Grimm said. The challengers also know this and are trying their luck, Grimm said. And how has that been going for them? I asked. Every challenger has met a worse fate than the last. I think the kings are getting annoyed, Grimm answered. I chuckled at that. The Mbalai brothers were all powerful lions in their prime, with their coalition even more so. If the lion I killed a few months back was the quality of the challenger, then I'm afraid 10 of them wouldn't do the job of beating the brothers. That was one of the things I learned over the past few months when I encountered other rogue males. The Mbalai brothers were leagues above the average lion. It was funny how I thought Roku was an average male lion when in truth, he could probably take 2. I really met the final bosses at the start. I'm honestly kind of awesome for surviving till now. The morning continued as usual. Grimm gave me more news while I stretched my body and trained. At this point, he was for me what Zazu was for my father. No, he was even better. After that was out of the way, I continued my journey. The buffalo had covered much ground while I was sleeping like a baby, so I had to catch up again. It's been 2 days since I last ate, so I needed to think about my next hunt as well. After 2 hours had passed, I caught up with the herd of buffalo that I had been following. Initially, the herd only consisted of 31 members but on our journey, the herd had been joined by smaller herds and they now numbered close to 200. But after we caught up with the herd, Grimm flew down and gave a new proposal. My lord, should we stop here today? I just want to say that if we maintain this pace, I predict that we will be able to reach the main channel of the Mara River by the end of the day. I contemplated for a while. I did not have to hunt today, and I was far from hungry after the hefty meal I had 2 days ago. In the end, I wanted to reach the river as soon as possible instead of delaying it for another day. Let's go, I said, and then we left the herd for the river. It was not a tiring journey. I was only walking at a moderate pace for the whole day. The buffalo were just slow since they had to graze while they moved. In the end, just like Grimm had predicted, we managed to reach the river by the end of the day. The sun was dull orange by then, but there was still an hour or so before complete darkness. The first thing I noticed when I reached there was not the water or the swelling river. It was the sound. The sound of 10,000 creatures in one place. There was no specific sound or rhythm. It was a loud booming noise. The vibration affected the ground itself. I could feel a pulse beneath my paws. After I pushed through the last stretch of tall grass and crested a small slope, I finally got a view of the land below. This is... The rest of the sentence got stuck in my throat. Upon looking at the horizon, the sound suddenly made sense to me. In fact, I would argue that the sound did not tell enough about the sheer life that was breathing in the riverbanks of the Mara River. What was once a muddy little stream during the dry season had swollen into something monstrous and ancient. It twisted through the land like a great serpent, wide and dark, its surface rippling with powerful current. And along the riverbanks, including the land near the rivers, were filled to the brim with migrating animals. Antelopes, zebras, wildebeests, gazelles, etc. They stretched as far as the eye could see. They looked like endless ants from the high ground I was standing upon. They moved in waves, snorting and stamping. I looked around and noticed a herd of buffalo not too far from the river as well. The herd that I was following before were nothing compared to the thousands that were grazing in the land. Upon seeing such a sight, it was hard not to feel small. Like I was only a small part of a grander design. But after that moment of humility, pride and greed returned tenfold. How incredible would it to own this massive region and the ecosystem? How incredible would it be to be able to hunt any prey that I desired from the endless stretch of numbers? For a moment, it made me want to run back home and fight the kings of the Syringid pride and make this my kingdom. I went down to the riverbanks to witness everything up close. The closer I got to the river, the softer the earth got. It was wet and the relentless stamping from thousands of hooves had made it mud-like. The animals flee upon seeing me. So I was able to reach the riverbanks without much trouble at all. After that, I walked alongside the river. I followed the current and gazed carefully at the water that holds the infamous Nile crocodile. I spent some time like that, watching life unfold in front of my eyes. I even watched a small herd of zebras cross the river. The crocodiles that live in the water were the last thing the animal had to worry about. It was the strong current of the river, along with the slippery river bed, that caused the most deaths. The zebras jumped into the river one by one. The water exploded as their collective shriek filled the air. The river looked like it was boiling with the movement of 100 zebras. The river splashed frantically and soon enough, the sound of helpless cries filled the air. The current took the life of the weaker zebras and drowned them in its depths. Not just the current, in moments of panic, the zebras became their own enemy as they pushed each other down and knocked each other away. Many of them drowned without ever making it across the river. The crocodiles did not even have to kill. They waded further down the river and tore into the dead bodies in seconds. What an amazingly ruthless world I live in, I said while watching the scene unfold. But in that moment, a sound disturbed me. It was incredibly hard to notice with all the other sounds, but this one was distinct. A roar was always distinct to a lion's ear. The Mara River was too noisy to analyze the roar. I got curious, so I followed the sound of the roar. After my first encounter with another rogue, I was not too shy to confront them anymore. I knew they were all weak as shit. After nearly half an hour of walking, I still could not find the lion. The sun was already blood red right above the mountains. I was thinking about giving up, but then, I finally saw the lion I was looking for. But fortunately or unfortunately, the lion was on the opposite side of the river. There was around 40 meters of raging, flowing water that separated us. The thought of crossing the river never even crossed my mind. I think the other lion was also the same. But we were still curious about each other, so we walked until we were at the same place on both sides of the river. It was hard to see him clearly, but I still saw enough to know that he was injured. There was no sign of a pride nearby, and the roar he just let out was not that of a patrolling king. If I had to guess, he was a lion that just failed to take over a pride. And no, not the Syringid pride. The land beyond the river was the Masai Mara. So the lion was from Masai Mara, and he just failed to take over a pride from that region, not ours. It was like we were from completely different countries, but we met on the border courtesy of the migrating prey. I tilted my head and squinted to get a better look. The lion was quite huge, definitely bigger than Roku and Makalai, but smaller than Baraka. I know I said that rogues were weak just now, but I did not think the lion I was looking at was weak by any means. Although he was injured, he carried himself with something regal. Like he made a deal with destiny, and he knew that his recent loss was just a part of his success and not a failure. It was hard to put into words. We stared at each other for a while. Neither of us made a sound and just observed each other. He was sizing me up just as I was sizing him. There was an odd sense of familiarity. But we didn't have much time as the sun was already sinking halfway into the mountains. I never got to find out why he felt so odd and familiar to me. The only thing I know is that when the lion turned his head and the rays of the setting sun hit him just right, you could see a grave wound just above his right eye. The injury would no doubt turn into a scar even his fur couldn't hide. I will try and remember him with that in case we meet again. A lion with a scar on his right eye. A Scarface Lion. Chapter 68, Time Skip, 4. First POV. I spent nearly a week in the Mara River. The place was literally a predator's heaven. There was so much prey to hunt that I did not know which one to choose. I killed 5 different prey in the span of a week. I knew it was a waste to kill that much, but I couldn't help myself when they were just right there. More often than not, injured from crossing the river, so they couldn't have been an easier victim. I ate zebras and wildebeest. They tasted incredible after not eating them for 4 whole months. I nearly forgot the light taste and soft texture of their meat compared to a buffalo. Although strangely enough, I rarely find predators other than myself in the Mara River. With how much food there was, you would think predators would come here every year, but no. Predators like cheetahs and leopards did not like the chaos one bit as it turned out. The only carnivore I found near the river was a clan of hyenas. Like the little opportunistic freaks they were, hyenas came to the river as well. They pick out the tired and weak animals or sometimes feed on the carcass of animals that washed ashore on the riverbank. I'll admit that they did well to avoid me during the whole week. I could not get my hands on a single one of them. They ran on sight. Anyway, after a week had passed, most animals had crossed the river and were heading to the central part of the Serengeti. The buffalo herd that now numbered in the thousands were among these animals. So naturally, I followed them back to the central region as well. Other animals were good, but I was already addicted to buffalo meat. With the progress I made over the past 3 months, I also think that they were the best diet for my progress and growth. Life continued. But problems arose in the following weeks. Hunting a buffalo while they were in small, scattered herds was much easier than when they were in a big herd. I had to find this out the hard way. The first and foremost problem I encountered was that it was much harder to isolate one buffalo when they were in groups. This immediately put a stop to one of the most important parts of my strategy when it comes to buffalo hunting. The second thing was the fact that the bachelors were not at odds with each other compared to when they lived in small herds. They had enough food and mating candidates without needing tough competition. If you remember, I failed my hunts mostly when 2 or more bachelors knew how to work together. During the wet season and when the herd was large, they almost always worked together and it was impossible to know which bachelor was the best one to target. Another reason was that the buffalo were stronger than before. They were properly hydrated and well fed. The weather was also not as dry, so they did not get tired as easily. If I had tried to hunt these buffalo 3 months back, I would have failed very hard and probably would never taste buffalo meat until I got a pride of my own to help me. But luckily for me, the dry season had given me enough experience and time to grow. I failed the first 3 or 4 times while trying to take on the giant herd of buffalo. I had to resort to hunting a wildebeest when I could not find an opportunity to take them down in the first week. But like always, I adapted. I threw away my previous strategy and made a new one that was more suited to hunting a buffalo during the wet season. It was quite a drastic change compared to the strategy I used before. Previously, I hunted at noon when the sun was high in the sky and when the buffalo would tire quickly. But this time, I hunt in the middle of the night to early morning. It was during this period that the buffalo had the deepest sleep. The plan was simple. I stalked the herd during the night and searched for an isolated member. The recent hunting required raw power, so it's been a while since I used it. But do not forget, I was a master of stealth and stalking. It was the skill that Surabi praised me the most for. My build, which was wide shoulders, big paws and a low center of gravity, made me naturally silent and stealthy, contrary to my size. The buffaloes had horrible vision which was even worse during the night. They relied on their ears in the dark. My incredible stealth, coupled with the fact that they live in a big herd where my accidental sounds could be taken for the sound of other buffalo, it was quite effortless to sneak around them. After I had found a buffalo that slept the furthest from the herd, I made it my target. It could be male, female or subadult. The one most isolated was the target. Although it was more often than not always a bachelor. And then it was just a matter of taking down that buffalo, which seemed like it would be harder than it sounds, but it was actually not. Killing an unprepared and sleeping buffalo was quite easy. It was easier than killing a tired buffalo. Buffaloes sleep on the ground. When they sleep, they tuck their legs under their belly or lie sideways. Both were extremely vulnerable positions, which I took advantage of. I especially liked it when they would tuck their legs under their body, because it was just a matter of biting into their open neck and wrestling them down with my weight. They could never get back up after that. My weight alone was enough to keep them on the ground. The buffalo could not cry out for help because I was blocking their windpipe. The intense struggle and trashing caught the attention of some members, but it was not enough to warrant getting up and checking. I made sure not to release any lion sounds as well to keep them unaware. They always struggled fiercely for a minute or two. But their leg was stuck under their own body, so they could not pin me to the ground or utilize their horns to harm me. And I was already physically strong enough to take them on, so they had no chance. They usually die before 5 minutes pass. They die from suffocation. So that was the strategy I used during the wet season when I went buffalo hunting. Just like I promised when I took down my first buffalo, I made them a stable source of my diet. The change in season meant that resources were plentiful once more and there were many prey to hunt other than the giant widow makers. It also meant that life was not as hard, so I could focus more on training again. That was the mindset that I returned to the moment survival was nigh guaranteed. But unlike the other times that I trained, I decided to pick a lot of fights with rogue males in the following months as part of my training routine. You might be wondering why that was, and I got a very good reason for that. It was not just because I was bloodlust that I went after other male lions. So here's the thing. There were many rogue males in the Serengeti after the dry season came to an end. This was because most of these males came down to this territory during the harsh season. They had challenged the Mbalai brothers for the kingdom, but all of them failed. But since lions rarely die in a battle for dominance, they remained in the Serengeti after being defeated. And where do you think these rogue lions go after being defeated and chased away? That's right, they went to the area in the Serengeti where the Serengeti pride did not live. They went to the opposite side of the region where the Mbalai brothers rarely patrolled and visited. But guess who lived there? Me. I had been avoiding the Mbalai brothers since I arrived in the Serengeti. My copy was located in this part of the territory. Although not official, it could be said that this part of the region was under me. It was my kingdom. That meant it was up to me to deal with these defeated rogue males. But you might still be asking, why not chase them away or avoid them like I did the Mbalai brothers? Why do I insist on picking a fight with them? It began the moment I returned to my home and I saw 2 shameless lions sleeping on my copy. I had mournfully left my home a few weeks ago, but upon my return, my home did not even smell like mine anymore. It was marked by other scents, 2 scents. It was an odd recall of the past when 2 of the Mbalai brothers came to my copy and left their marks all over it. The same burning rage that I felt in that moment resurfaced. But this time, I had my target and I had the power to tear them apart. I genuinely crashed out after that. An hour later, I had to sleep with 2 corpses. My kill count increased to 3 lions, but I was satisfied, far from it actually. In that moment, I decided to hunt down and kill all the rogues on my side of the region as a part of my training. Before I even knew it, 3 months passed like that. Chapter 69, Kinslayer. Third POV. 3 months later. The wet season had transformed the Serengeti into a vast emerald ocean. Rivers flowed again, winding like silver serpents across the land. Thunderclouds hung low and heavy in the sky, and the air was thick with the scent of mud, grass, and life. The predators thrived. So did the prey. In such a land, 3 rogue lions stayed under the wide shelter of a tree. They had just finished hunting a wildebeest and were now enjoying their meal. The 3 lions were not related by blood, so their coalition was one of the rare ones in the wild. They all came to the Serengeti as lone rogues, but after seeing the Mbalai brothers, they united as one to take down the current kings. Although things didn't go as planned for them, they were defeated by the prime kings, rather effortlessly in fact. Their defeat was so clear and hard that they never challenged the Mbalai brothers again, even after 4 months. These days, they stay away from the region of the Serengeti pride. They were young and inexperienced, so they took their time to grow and get stronger before they would challenge the Mbalai brothers once more. This was a very successful hunt. You both did a great job this time, Kosa, the oldest and biggest one among the 3, said. He was the unspoken leader of the coalition. That is why he had a seat right before the open belly of the wildebeest and had the privilege of feasting on the organs while the other 2 lions ate the shoulders and back respectively. I can't believe this part of the region is uninhabited by any pride. The Syringid pride has too much territory that they are just wasting good land, Sifu said while tearing a chunk of meat from the shoulder of the carcass. I agree. I guess the kings are only strong, they clearly lack the brain to maintain their territory, Kosa relied, blood dripping from his jaw. The three lions continued feasting like that for a while, sharing small talk while they filled their belly. This type of activity was slowly strengthening their brotherhood, even though they may not be related by blood. But don't you think it's also quite strange? Tambo, the last and youngest of the three, voiced out his thoughts. What do you mean? Sifu asked. The three kings know we are here. They should also know the danger we pose to them considering we are a coalition of three just like them. We are not just any other challengers, Tambo said. But they never even come to this side of the region. I don't expect them to come and fight us, but patrolling the area or marking it should be something they should do, right? After all, it's still their kingdom, he added. Kosa paused his eating for a while as he thought over what the youngest said. Sifu on the other hand did not care and simply laughed. So? What do you think is stopping them from doing their duties? Sifu asked with a grin, clearly amused. I don't know. But it seems something is clearly stopping them from coming to this part of the region, even though it's their own kingdom, Tambo said, his voice a little ominous. Well. Kosa swallowed a liver, we are not the only rogues that is staying here. So they probably did not want to antagonize all of us at once. In the end, they all find that reasonable. They exchanged nods and continued with their meal. But as the time passed, the storm cloud that was blocking the midday sun slowly passed. The sun finally shone down on them, and it was at this moment that they noticed the shadows. Kosa tilted his head before looking up. That's odd, Sifu commented as he looked up as well. Vultures. Around 30 vultures were flying overhead. The three lions did not notice it before when the sun was shielded, but after the cloud passed, the shadows cast by the vultures were quite annoying and distracting. They released screeches, as if responding to their gaze. It was quite odd how they made sounds so suddenly. Like they were laughing at them from the sky. Like there was a joke that they didn't know and it was funny as hell. They never gathered in such numbers before, or this quickly, Kosa said, a little concern in his tone. But in the end, what were vultures to a lion? There was nothing to worry about. Yet their calm and peace were short-lived. It was like the vultures were just a bad omen before the real disaster struck. Roar! A roar came out of nowhere. The sheer volume of the roar was enough to make all three lions flinch back dramatically. Their fur and mane puffed out as they felt goosebumps wash through their body. Roar! The roar was the product of sheer power. It felt like the mountains were screaming and thunder was crying. The roar was so loud that the echoes felt like a different roar of their own. You could not even tell which direction the sound was coming from because it shook the whole world. And the silence that followed such volume was deafening. Perhaps because every creature that heard the roar froze similarly to the three lions, and that made the world still for a moment. Fortunately, there were only 2 roars and then it stopped. Dot. 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 Among the 3 lions, none of them spoke. They just eyed each other with a wary look and varying emotions. The only thing they shared at that moment was the hint of fear and anger. From the roar, you could tell that the lion was not patrolling and neither was it announcing its presence in hopes of chasing them away. It felt like the roar was declaring something. The silence stretched for a long time until it was broken by the screeches of the vultures in the sky. They seemed to get even noisier after the roar. What was that? Tambo asked. It sounds like a declaration, Kosa said thoughtfully before he showed his teeth with a growl, he is hunting us. All 3 of them perked their ears and stood up fully from the carcass. They were looking in all directions in search of the lion responsible for the roar. And then they saw movement from their right. There. Kosa was the one who spotted the movement. All 3 lions lunged forward to face the new lion. They did not see him yet, but they could see the movement among the tall grass. The movement stopped for a second before it increased. Then they saw him moving towards them at a moderate speed. The lion still hid his body from their view, but he was crawling through the grass rapidly. Get ready! Kosa warned, and every lion crouched down, ready to pounce at a moment's notice. But when the movement in the tall grass finally reached them, they realized that it was not a lion. The head of a vulture popped up among the tall grass. The vulture looked at them with these clear, unnerving eyes. The lions could not even put down their guards due to the eerie gaze. And then the vulture smiled with a barely open beak. Behind you, it said. All three lions felt their inner alarms going off. Their instincts screamed at the giant presence that was right behind them, yet had somehow remained ignored. They turned around immediately and then they saw him. A behemoth of a lion. He was standing sideways with his head turned towards them. Because of this, they could see his body in all its beastly glory. It was enough to strike fear into the lions. That is. Sifu said but lost words halfway. Bigger than Baraka, Tambo completed the sentence for him. It was a wonder how such a giant beast could sneak up on them, even though they were distracted by the vulture. He is dangerous, Kosa said, and his body trembled for a moment. Very, very dangerous. They tried sizing up the new lion, but the closer they looked, the more they gave in to fear. The sheer muscle mass on the lion, the unbelievable length and width, the size of his paws and his mane that looked like black flames covering his head and neck. He looked monstrous even to the eyes of the lions. The distance between them was too close to run. They would need to fight in order to survive. That line of thought went through every single one of them. And so, let's go, Kosa said and began walking towards the new lion. Tambo and Sifu followed right behind him. They were a bit afraid in the beginning, yes. But that was easily destroyed by pride and ego. The lion was big and strong, but there were three of them and only one of him. Perhaps that was what they used to gather up their courage while charging at the superior beast. The three lions walked, jogged, and then ran towards the lion. They all released guttural roars and violent growls as they made their way towards the intruder. The lion, no. Leo, on the other hand, only grinned and remained unmoving until the last second. When the clash happened, it could only be described as utterly despairing. For the three lions, it felt like fighting against a mountain-shaped lion or a buffalo in lion skin. They were utterly helpless when it came to any field of strength and power. They all attacked at the same time. No one was holding back, and they attacked Leo with everything they had. The fight between four different lions was brutal and violent. They trashed around on the ground, their chains of growl and the sound of their violence filled the air. But as the fight went on, the three began to slow down and their attacks became weaker and sluggish. On the other hand, Leo exploded harder and fought more violently. He had been saving up his energy to finish them when they got tired. In that moment, the three lions finally realized the gap between them was merely an illusion. In truth, the gap was even wider than they imagined. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. Sifu roared and then lunged straight towards Leo. He was a blur of muscle and claws that hit Leo with a brutal assault. But Sifu felt like he hit a boulder when they clashed. Sifu tried to bite at his head, but Leo ducked under the attack and he clamped down at the neck of Sifu instead. The rogue lion cried out in pain and agony. Right then, Tambo sprinted from the side like a flash of lightning. He flanked Leo and lunged towards the open ribs. But before Tambo could land his attack, Leo lifted Sifu from the ground. He used raw power to lift the other lion, and then he slammed him down at the lunging Tambo. Leo was using a fully grown lion as a weapon. Ragdolling them seemed like no issue to him. But Tambo did not stay down for long. He twisted his body with the flexibility of a cat and quickly escaped from Sifu's weight. But the moment he rose back up, Leo swung his paw at him. Tambo felt a heavy hit on his head. He felt that he was knocked out for a split second. That was how brutally the paw landed. But just when he thought the attack was over, Leo sank his claws into Tambo's skin. The powerful attack was never meant to strike, it was only meant to grab. Tambo could not imagine what would happen if he were hit with a proper strike. His head might just explode upon touch. Tambo felt a powerful tug and he couldn't do anything other than obey the powerful force. His head was pulled forward and he was met with a wide-open jaw. Tambo opened his mouth to fight back, but the jaw that came for him was so much bigger and wider. Leo then proceeded to bite at the muzzle. There was a cracking sound of bone snapping clean off. When Lu pulled back, he had the upper muzzle of Tambo on his jaw while the younger lion lost half his face. Blood spilled out like a violent fountain. Tambo released a string of vibrations that did not even sound like a scream. His tongue and his lower teeth were all visible without the upper muzzle to cover them. He did not even have a nose anymore, only an open lower jaw. Tambo pulled back and ran. He ran as fast as he could, but he could not run from his injuries. In the end, he collapsed like dead weight not too far away. His muzzle was not the only injury. His body was marked with claw marks and bites from where he was bleeding a copious amount of blood. He could not survive for long. He would die in minutes due to blood loss alone. Leo turned his attention back to Sifu and he was kinder to this lion. Leo bit at the back of the skull and with a chilling crunch, the lion died on the spot. It was hard to end the fight in the beginning, but after the lions were tired, Leo found it to be almost too easy. Kosa watched all of this happen from a distance. He too was marked with many injuries. He had lost one of his eyes, and his nose was badly scarred as well. On his right shoulder was a flabby skin that had turned inside out and hung loosely with its red flesh. It was torn apart by Leo's claw during the initial phase of the fight. His body also had many other injuries, but he did not yield until now. But after seeing Leo kill Sifu with ease, he finally let go of his ego and ran. He looked back briefly after he ran and he saw that Leo was standing on top of Sifu's corpse and he was quite far away from him. He faced forward and ran for his life. There was a bit of relief when he realized that Leo could not catch up. But that was only positive thinking. Kosa heard the sound of a beast running behind him. When he looked again, Leo seemed to have transported right behind him. He felt his heart beating so hard and fast that it hurt inside his chest. "You should die with your brothers," Leo said, and then clamped down on the tail. He planted his paws on the ground and successfully stopped Kosa from running. He then tugged as hard as he could to bring the lion over to him. Leo jumped on the back of Kosa and pinned him to the ground with his weight. He opened his jaw and clamped down on the open nape. The lion struggled fiercely and used his claws to try and tear him off his back. Leo grunted and released his bite. But only to bite down on the paws that were clawing at his head. Kosa released a painful roar as Leo bit off a portion of his paw. His claws and fingers were spat out right beside his head. Leo then continued tearing into the nape. There was a reason why a lioness would bite at the nape when carrying a cub and why the cub would freeze when bitten there. The cervical spine was located in this area, and this nervous system controls the movement. Leo tore off the tough and loose skin protecting the area before he crushed the spine with his jaw. Kosa did not even feel pain in that moment. He only felt his body freeze and then become completely paralyzed. His whole body felt numb. There was no longer any sensation. Kosa almost felt relieved that the pain and struggle had stopped. "So it's here, hey," he heard Leo speak while standing on top of him, "good to know." After that, Leo simply walked over his paralyzed body and took his leave immediately without even bothering to land a finishing blow. Kosa, in his paralyzed state, watched his leaving figure. It was at this moment that he realized why the Bailai brothers did not wander in this region to get them. There was something much scarier than them roaming around here. Kosa continued staring at Leo as his figure slowly disappeared in the distance. Until a vulture landed in front of him and pecked at his eye and pulled out his eyeball, completely blinding him. The vultures that were flying in the sky flew down like hungry beasts and feasted on the body of the lions. Alive or not, they didn't care. Chapter 70, Time to Conquer. Third POV. 3 years 2 months old. The sun rose on the horizon in all its brilliance. The light banished the darkness of the night into shrinking shadows, and the chill of midnight became a forgotten sensation beneath the warmth of the first rays. The green grass of the plain swayed like an ocean. The green trees danced along with the morning wind, their leaves rustling softly. It was the perfect start to a perfect day. The harsh serenity was the kindest during this time of the year. Grim soared high above the land, riding the warm currents that rose from the open plains below. The scenic view of the Serengeti was even more magnificent from such height, and Grim was one of the few lucky animals that could experience it all. The world beneath him was alive with motion. Zebras trotted in herds, warthogs rooted near patches of mud, wild dogs raced in formation, and hyenas weaved through grass in search of food to scavenge. Life thrived in the wet season. But Grim simply flew over all these incredible sights. In a land that looked like paradise, he had a place he needed to be. And that was beside the king. Whoosh! Grim expertly changes his trajectory in the air. He did not even have to flap his wings, he simply glided with his long wingspan. It would be correct to say he was swimming in the air. Eventually, Grim reached his destination. His sharp eyes spotted the lion walking through the tall grass of the land. He was hidden and perfectly camouflaged, but it was hard to escape Grim's eyes. Grim swooped low and glided right above his king with a screeching sound. It was a way to declare his presence to the king and also signify that he was immediately onto doing his job without being told. Grim took himself higher to the sky with a flap of his mighty wing. Then he flew towards the watering hole at a distance. It only took a few seconds until the lake came into view. There, Grim did what he was supposed to do and scouted the entire area. When he found that nothing was amiss, he slowed down his flight and smoothly glided around in circles. When he didn't return with any news, Leo would take that as everything was perfectly fine and in place. Grim watched from above as Leo slowly came towards the lake. He did not bother hiding his presence and strode forward in a slow, regal pace through the tall grass. The animals around the watering hole immediately took notice of him, and they froze. But no one ran, no one dared move too much without permission. They watched with bated breath as Leo made his way to the shore of the lake. The crocodiles that were sunbathing on the shore moved and ran back into the water to hide in its depths. A slow growl left his throat. He lowered his head and took a drink of water. In the meantime, all the other animals that were drinking from the lake stopped. They did not drink with him. They waited for Leo to finish. Although not official yet, the land itself has accepted Leo as her king. The effect of his presence alone was proof that he was above every other animal in the Serengeti. He was a creature at the very top of the food chain. Grim could not help but compare to the first time he met Leo. The young teenager who came to the Serengeti with a naive mind and full ambition. He would have never expected him to change so drastically in the span of 1 year. Now, Leo stood as the biggest lion in the wild, and his strength was beyond any other. Leo himself seemed to be thinking about something similar as he looked at his own reflection on the lake. It had been a full year now since he first came to the Serengeti. His mane looked like a storm cloud that spread wide around his head and shoulders. It was almost fully black like the night. When the wind blows on the mane, it moves and looks like a dark flame around his head. His body was mostly solid muscle with barely any unhealthy fat. His bulbous shoulder and wide chest gave him the thickness that no other lion should have. His forearm looked like it had ropes wrapped around the bone. His paw was twice the size of the other lions with claws that fit perfectly with the huge paw. Leo continued staring at his own reflection. He seemed to be deep in thought. But after a while, he turned around and left the watering hole. Grim followed Leo from above as he wandered through the savannah. Today was not hunting day, so Grim did not have other duties except keeping an eye from above. After nearly an hour of walking, they came upon the huge herd of buffalo. Leo was able to track them down even without the help of Grim. But the vulture was left confused. But he didn't question anything and continued to observe. He was ready to be called by Leo any time now. But it seemed Leo did not have any intention of hunting the buffalo because he did not stalk them. Instead, he simply walked around the edge of the herd. But the reaction of the buffalo was wild to see. The bachelors who stood at the edge of the herd to be the first line of protection backed away when they saw Leo approaching them. They were not running away like other prey would, but you could see from their body language that they wanted nothing to do with Leo. That alone was a phenomenal achievement, considering buffalo would not bat a single eye at even a full pride of lions. But Leo had taught them to fear predators in the past 6 months. The buffaloes were dumb but not clueless about what was happening in the recent months. They felt like prey in the presence of Leo. It was an incredible sight to see the giants flinching back from a cat a quartet their size. On the other hand, Leo did not even glance towards the herd. His belly was still full from the meal of yesterday and he was in no mood for hunting or eating. Instead, he continued walking. He walked for hours in the savannah. At that point, Grim was truly perplexed about what his king was up to. Until finally, in the early afternoon, Leo stopped in front of one particular tree. The tree did not stand out to any of the other trees, but if you had a good sense of smell, you could smell the scent of the Mbalai brothers on it. Indeed, Leo had walked to the region of the Serengeti pride. Grim, Leo finally called his name. The vulture flew down almost immediately and landed beside Leo. "What is it, my lord?" "It's time," Leo said. "I am going to take the Serengeti." And then he proceeded to put his scent over the tree. It was a small act, like a small spark. But that was the start of something much bigger. The season for growth had come to an end. Now it was time for harvest. Chapter 71, The First Spark. First POV. "I'll come back for you," said the young lion without a tail towards the female that loved him. "I promise, I'll come back." The lion was so young, still juvenile, even with his size. But there was enough fire to burn the world in his eyes. Scar! 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 A voice so enraged it was barely coherent. "Please live well and survive for the next 2 years so that I can return and kill you myself, a promise stronger than fate or destiny." Not a single day had passed without recalling that fateful day. I did not forget anything, not a single detail. I had only been suppressing them so far. I never forgot my purpose. I knew why I was here, I knew what I was doing and I knew what I had to do. A year had passed since I came into this new land, and it was about time I made my next big move. I had a promise to keep, so it was time to conquer. But first, we need a plan, I said while walking away from the region actively occupied by the Bailai brothers. I left my scent inside their region, and that would be enough for now. The idea of charging right at them and taking a fight against all three brothers was definitely quite an attractive proposal, but that was a fool's endeavor. I had to remind myself that no matter how big and powerful I got, my mind was and will always be my greatest weapon. At this point in my life, I was quite confident in claiming victory even if I fought against all three brothers at once. After all, I had not been training and hunting buffalo for nothing. I was strong, stronger than any African lion that ever lived, I was sure. But what I was not sure of was a clean victory. The chances of losing were low but not zero. And even if I did win, I might suffer grievous injury or another disability while in the process. There was no hospital in the wild, so if I got a serious injury, it could hinder me for the rest of my life, and I did not want that. So the first thing I needed was a strategy and a coherent plan. And I'm pretty sure I already had one. What do you have in mind? Grim asked me from behind. He was perched on top of my back while I walked through the savannah. Vultures were giant birds that had difficulty flying too slowly and low on the ground. He could not adjust to my walking speed while flying, so I allowed him to stand on my back so that we could talk while moving away from the enemy territory. He and the other vultures were vital for the plan I had in mind. In a battle of 3 against 1, I will never be in control of the fight, even if I were twice as strong as I am currently, I said. It was not a matter of strength but numbers. They had the numerical advantage to dictate the flow of the battle during the fight. I would be the one taking them on and challenging them. But what I can control is everything that happens before the fight, I said, and a smile tugged at my face. There are 2 ways to reduce the risk in this fight. And that is either to grow stronger, which I have been doing until now. Or make my enemies weaker, which I will start doing from now on. Make your enemies weaker? Grim asked, and I could see the confusion. How are you going to do that? I could no longer stop the grin from spreading across my lips. Back at home, we call it war crimes. Third POV. When evening came, the Bailai brothers set out to patrol their territory as per usual. Their entire kingdom was incredibly massive, making it so that even though it was technically theirs, they rarely visited some parts of it. 4 different lion prides could have thrived in their kingdom, that was how much territory they had under their rule. If they were to patrol their entire kingdom daily, it would take the whole day even if they separated. So they mostly live in the best part of the region, which was the southern and central part of Serenity. Baraka patrolled their region from the north while Roku started from the south. Makalai, on the other hand, stayed with the pride as he was still recovering from the previous battle with a rogue. Makalai, the ever-aggressive warrior, had rarely seen days when he was completely unharmed and healthy. He had even become meaner ever since their encounter with Leo 6 months ago. When rogues came, he aimed to kill them on the spot. Speaking of Leo, Roku recalled his very first encounter with the young lion as he patrolled the edges of their occupied region. It had been a year since then, but the events still hung heavy on his mind. The physical and mental wound he suffered from the juvenile lion never truly healed. They remained a fresh scar on his existence. He remembered it had been like any other day and he was patrolling just like he was doing now. But then he ran into an abandoned kill and got the scent of the new rogue, and he decided to track it alone. It was a decision he regrets until now. The rogue lion remained in the Serengeti still, but he had not shown any aggression or intent to challenge for the throne. Which was why the Bailai brothers also left him alone on his side of the Serengeti. They couldn't rule the whole Serengeti anyway, so the brothers wouldn't mind if Leo started a new pride in that part of the region. Their last encounter had left a permanent mark on their heart. Prideful lions they may be, but they were slowly getting older, and with age comes wisdom. There was no need to start a conflict and risk their life for something they didn't even have any use for, which was the land. And yes, the 3 firmly believed that if it came down to a fight with the Tylus lion, at least one of the brothers would perish. That was the promise Leo left in their last encounter. The Bailai brothers were reaching 7 years old now. They were at their absolute prime at the moment, but it would be a quick descent from here. An active lion king in the wild was lucky if it lived past 12 years old. Due to the constant fight for dominance in their life, a lion's health goes down fast when they reach an older age. In the span of 2 or 3 years, they went from a dominant king to a barely functioning male. Roku stopped his train of thought and came back to his senses. His nose twitched as it caught a familiar smell. It was a scent that made his body tremble and forced his fur to stand. He felt goosebumps washing through his body and he had to make the effort to calm his heart. He wet his nose with his tongue and took in the scent in the air once more. He needed to make sure that he was smelling this right. But after taking another sniff, the scent was still there and lingered. His lips peeled in an angry snarl, showing fangs that had taken a dozen lives of rogue lions like this one. Roku could not stop his bubbling anger when he identified the person behind the scent. Leo, Roku spat out, followed by a roar. He released a train of guttural roars as he made his way towards the source of the smell. The sound of his roar echoed through the land, a warning and a decree. But as Roku got closer to the smell, he realized that the scent was from the urine Leo had left behind, and he was no longer in the vicinity. He felt his anger being pushed back by something in his throat. Roku reached the tree that was marked by Leo. Was it fate that he was the first one to discover his scent once more after a year had passed? Whatever the case may be, Roku stood in front of the tree. His eyes looked, but they were unseeing orbs inside his skull. He was deep in thought and his brain did not have enough capacity to process vision. It was all due to the scent. The stinking scent of urine that made Roku want to back off as far as he could due to the sheer intensity. And it was not because the urine was actually stinking either. Lions had a great sense of smell, and especially the males could identify much from the smell. They could differentiate individuals, get a hint of the diet and the hydration level of the lion, determine its health, but most importantly, they could smell the hormones in the urine. A lion could tell which one was female, whether she was in heat or ovulating, etc., from the hormones contained in the urine. And Leo's urine might as well be liquid testosterone. That was the reason why it was stinking so badly in Roku's nose. But for a female, it might have been the most attractive thing in the world. The testosterone he smelled from Leo's mark only hinted at bad things for the Lion Kings. The level of testosterone in the urine was one way to determine the strength and aggression of another male. The smell of strength was the most intense in Leo compared to every single lion Roku had encountered so far. After standing there for a while, Roku heard a movement behind him. Baraka came forward, he had responded to Roku's roar. There were no words exchanged as Bakara could also smell Leo's mark. He only had a deep frown on his face. It was dangerous. So very dangerous. Leo had finally decided to challenge for the throne like every other rogue. And for the nightmare of the Mbalai brothers, it seemed the enemy had gotten even stronger. Let's go, Baraka said. We need to prepare. The brothers did not know, but it was too late for preparation. The war had already begun. And on that very night and every other night that followed, they heard a thunderous roar echoing in the darkness of the night. The volume of the roar seemed to be enhanced in the odd silence of the night. It was loud enough to tear the sky and shake the ground. And yet it always ended there. Other challengers would have followed up with the roar and attacked the kings to claim the throne. But Leo just roared now and then without any action. Yet that was enough to keep the kings on edge and alert, never getting a good rest in the days that followed. Chapter 72, Preparation. First POV. The art of making your enemies weaker was not an honorable path. Some might even say that the person using such tactics must not have pride. It was quite unfair. But fair went out of the window the moment this war became 3 against 1. My pride did not get in the way of utilizing every advantage I could get. There were 2 ways in which I made life difficult for my enemies. The first one, I called the harassment method. It was basically just me, making sure that the Mbalai brothers never got a moment of peace for the following week. I would do this by wandering into their territory while they were not patrolling and announcing my presence. I declared war using my roar without actually following up on the threat. I did this just enough to always keep the 3 brothers on edge. The brothers had each other, but I had an ally in the sky. Grim became everything for the whole week. He was my eyes in the sky and the reason why I could time all my harassments perfectly. I already had the habit of hunting buffalo in the middle of the night, so I did not have any proper sleeping schedule. Therefore, I adjusted myself depending on the reaction of the 3 brothers. Lions were known to be able to sleep during the day and night, so to make this method effective, I had to harass them 24/7. Whenever they decided to have a rest, Grim would inform me, and I would announce my presence with a roar. When they thought that I would not follow up on my threats like usual and insisted on sleeping, I walked even deeper into their territory and got close enough for them to feel and smell my presence. I marked my scent on the trees and places where they had previously done the same. I was claiming ownership of their kingdom before even challenging them, and that easily got to their nerves. I always had them guessing. They probably have nightmares about me during the brief sleep they had time to time. On the other hand, I let Grim guide me whenever the Mbalai brothers tried to get me. They would often try to use their numerical advantage to box me, but the vulture would always make sure I escaped. And when I felt tired, I could just lie in the open plain and sleep whenever I wanted. I knew that the vultures in the sky would warn me in case of any danger, so I could rest peacefully. The difference in having an ally in the sky and on the ground was stark. Although the vultures could not fight, they had their other uses, and I made sure to exploit that to the fullest. And yes, I said vultures with an S. Because it was not only Grim that I used in my plan. The rest of the vultures had been benefiting from me for long enough, and it was time to get them to work. The second method of weakening the Mbalai brothers was where the rest of the vultures came in useful. I called it the starvation method. And it was exactly as it sounds. This method consisted of making sure that the Sirjit pride as a whole, including the three brothers, could never succeed in hunting down food. The vultures were the ones to sabotage their hunt each time. Imagine this. The hunting party of the Sirjit pride set out to catch prey. They found a bountiful herd of impalas, and they began stalking them in a proper formation. But right in that vital moment where the hunters slowly stalked their prey, a dozen or so vultures swooped down from the sky. They did not have to do much, only flap their wings and expose all the hiding spots of the lioness. The herd of impala saw the lioness and ran for their life immediately. The vultures, on the other hand, flew back into the sky. They glided overhead, ready to sabotage the hunting party once more whenever they tried their luck again. Normally, it would be impossible to get the vultures to sabotage the lions like that. They were scavengers that fed on the remains left by the lions or other predators, so a successful hunt was just as beneficial for them as it was for the lions. But with the leftovers I had from every hunt, these vultures did not need other lions to get their food. They knew they only needed me to survive and thrive. I've proven this throughout the year. So they could go against their instinct and sabotage the predators. I was not idle in executing this plan either. I overhunted the herds in the territory in an attempt to drive them far away from these fertile lands. But none of the meat went to waste or got taken by the Sirjit pride. I used the carcass to reward the obedient vultures. A week quickly passed by, and the Mbalai brothers were not getting food or proper rest. I could feel their desperation growing with every passing day from then on. I continued my harassment and sabotaged their hunting as the second week rolled by. But in the early days of the second week, the Mbalai brothers finally had enough of my tricks. Not getting proper rest was not a big issue for the kings. But food was another problem entirely. They were already searching for a herd when I first began my harassment, so if you think for a minute, it was nearly 2 weeks since the pride had their last meal. That could not go on. The pride had not only adults but also growing cubs to feed. The Mbalai brothers began making big moves. They moved away from their usual hunting grounds and made their way towards my part of the region. They realized they couldn't succeed in their hunt no matter how many times they tried. The vultures would always sabotage their hunt by revealing their hiding spot. They realized the only way they could get food was by hunting prey that wouldn't run even if they were seen and their hiding spots were exposed. Indeed, the Sirjit pride moved towards my territory to hunt for the herd of buffalo. And what can I say except it was all part of my plan. Exactly on the 10th day since I decided to finally challenge the three kings, the pride set out to hunt the buffalo. Not knowing that it was on this day that everything would finally come to an end. I lay low as the powerful adults of the pride set out to hunt a buffalo, including all three brothers. Whenever the pride hunted buffalo, the males needed to be involved since the females did not have the power to take down such a massive beast. This time, the vultures did not even try sabotaging their position, knowing that it was futile. The buffalo wouldn't run even if they saw the lions. I waited in a hidden location while I let the pride hunt the buffalo. I do not forget things easily. I was a learner. The idea of taking a bird as my subject and using a completely different animal to aid me in a war was something I learned from Mufasa and Scar, respectively. So I still remember the genius plan of the rogue I encountered 3 months ago. The one that tried to take advantage of my exhaustion and injury after a buffalo hunt. That plan would have succeeded if it were any other lion but me or if he had encountered me during my earlier hunt. And seeing the potential of that plan, I was applying that same strategy to the Mbalai brothers. After that was done, I would have completed my plan of weakening them as much as I could. What follows after that will be up to how I perform in this fight. I had done my preparation. Now let the battle for dominance begin. Chapter 74, The Battle for Dominance, Leo vs the Mbalai brothers, start. You guys must be having a laugh right now. I made the 1000 stones goal thinking there was no way you guys will reach it since we average at 700 stones a day. But I realize now that y'all have been holding back on me and was waiting to catch me lacking. 2000 stones in one day. 1200 plus above the second rank. We have been at the top for nearly 2 months now, but those are still impressive numbers indeed. Due to these numbers, double chapter is certain tomorrow. For now, enjoy the 3 chapters. Thank you all so much for the support, and I would appreciate it if you don't hold back your stones in other weeks as well. Third POV. It was high noon. In the eastern part of the Serengeti, life gathered near the watering hole. It was a hot day, so animals from all areas had come to drink the water. But unlike all these animals that gathered, the buffalo were an almost permanent resident of the lake. They never grazed too far from the watering hole these days, sustaining themselves from the rich overgrown vegetation supported by the underground waters near the lake. The herd of buffalo numbered in the thousands. They looked like a colony of ants from the sky. With their huge number and size, they were more of a breathing natural phenomenon than a herd of animals. So usually, the herd remained undisturbed. Even when they drank water from the lake, the crocodiles never attacked them, fearing that the buffalo would stomp them to death if they took even a single bite. Their only known predator was a lone lion called Leo. Other than that, nothing in the savannah could hurt them. But today was an exception. It was one of the rare moments when a pride of lions came out to hunt a buffalo. They only ever hunt buffalo when they are desperate, and that was true for the Serengeti pride. The pride hasn't eaten for almost 2 weeks, and their numerous attempts at hunting have been denied by a gang of vultures. So they target the buffalo, a bigger prey that requires power rather than stealth to take down. But things did not go as planned from the pride. The pride was not new to hunting buffalo. They just prefer easier prey over the giants of the animal kingdom. The Bailey brothers themselves could recall times in their earlier days when they took down a buffalo together. But things were different now than it was before. The buffalo had a consistent predator that hunts them in the form of Leo the lion. This made the buffalo have immense hatred towards lions in general. They were too scared to take action or show aggression towards Leo when they saw him, but upon seeing a group of lions that were not Leo, the buffalo sought out vengeance. A cloud of dust could be seen rising from one edge of the herd. The lions that were trying to hunt the buffalo became the ones to run away. They scattered in all directions while a dozen or so bachelors chased after the poor lions. Steam came out of their nose as they charged with reckless abandon. All the anger and grudge they felt towards Leo but were too afraid to show were taken out on the members of the Serengeti pride. But the lions were desperate. Their desperation might as well have eclipsed the anger of the buffalo. So even as they were chased and ragdolled once or twice, they didn't give up. The 3 brothers worked together. Roku was the brain of the formation, quickly finding patterns and coordination even amid the chaos of the angry bulls. Makalai was the bravest soul. Reckless was also another word to describe him. He was the one brave enough to put any plan Roku came up with into action. He had complete faith in his brothers, so even if the plan involved doing something dangerous, Makalai would do so in a heartbeat. The same thing happened in this situation as well. Ralko had tasked him to act as bait and lead one of the buffalo away from the rest of the herd. And he was doing an excellent job. Until now. I can't run anymore. Makalai roared out with the last bit of strength in his body. An angry bachelor chased after him. They were on the shore of the lake, a little isolated from the rest of the herd. You could see other buffalo in the distance, but they were not close enough to pose any danger anymore. The initial plan of leading one buffalo away was a success. I can't. Makalai could not finish his sentence as one of his paws slipped due to the wet mud of the shore. He fell to the ground and then the buffalo slammed into him. But luckily, due to the suddenness of the fall and a cat's natural reflex, Makalai was not crushed immediately under the weight of the bull. But the sharp edge of the horn left a clean cut and tear on his skin. He also felt immense pressure on his chest that might or might not have cracked some of his ribs. Great, just when I am about to fully recover, I get new injuries, Makalai thought in his mind. Makalai lay on his back. His claws came out and his teeth were bared as he tried to fend off against the unstoppable force of the buffalo's attack. The echoing sound of the buffalo and the sharp sound of an angry lion mixed together as both parties fought each other for a few seconds. But that was enough for the other members of the pride to finally reach him. Good job, brother! Baraka bellowed with a roar. He was the biggest among the 3 brothers and he was also the main power of the 3. He was leadership and strength in the form of a majestic white lion. His white fur was smeared by dirt and mud from being ragdolled and pushed by other buffalo at the beginning of the hunt. Although he seemed unharmed, that might just be because he was good at hiding his injuries. Baraka slammed into the side of the buffalo. He was big and powerful enough to push the buffalo away with the sheer force of his momentum. The buffalo nearly fell to the ground. But the buffalo adjusted his hooves and turned towards Baraka immediately. You could see from the buffalo that it had just entered a new phase of rage due to that attack. But right in that moment before the bull could charge at Baraka, another lion jumped at the buffalo from behind. Roku leapt on the back of the buffalo. His claws sank into the thick hide of the prey and then his jaw clamped down on the back. The buffalo released a grunt and tried to shake him off, but Roku latched on tightly. Baraka exploded forward and took advantage of the distraction. He crashed into the shoulder of the buffalo once more, and this time, he tried wrestling with the bull. His arms went around the thick neck of the giant prey and tried to control the head movement of the bull. But Baraka greatly underestimated the buffalo's ability to explode to great strength with barely any room. The sound of horns crashing onto skull and bone could be heard as the buffalo knocked Baraka on the face a few times before the white lion glued his head close to the neck so the bull could not utilize his horns. Makala, the ever-brave soul, did not try to stay out of battle just because of his injury. To be honest, the thought never even crossed his mind. He did not get up from the ground and instead rolled under the buffalo. He seemed unbothered that the buffalo could crush him under its hooves with one step, and he attacked at the neck and the underbelly. After the three kings fully engaged with the prey, the rest of the pride came to help as well. 2 lionesses came to attack the buffalo from both sides, and after a while, 3 more came to fill the empty spaces. The buffalo released small grunts and bellowing sounds as he bore the weight and teeth of 7 different lions, 3 of them kings. He was trying to call the rest of the herd for help. Nydia, shut him up. Roku was the first one to notice and gave the order. A new lioness came and bit at the mouth and nose of the buffalo, effectively shutting him up. Now it was 8 different lions working together to take the buffalo down. There were other lionesses as well, but since there was no longer any space to work with, they stood a few meters away and watched the event unfold. Eventually, even the buffalo could not last long fighting against so many lions. He collapsed on the ground due to exhaustion. That was when the lions dealt the finishing blow by attacking the softer parts of the hide. In the end, the pride managed to bring down the giant bachelor. "A little help, please," Makalai said in a muffled voice from under the buffalo. Baraka and Roku shared a laugh, even with exhaustion weighing heavily on their body. They pushed away the buffalo, and Makalai slipped out from under the weight. The rest of the pride also watched with smiles of victory. They circled around the prey but were not close to the carcass like the Hurra-Kings were. They would wait for them to eat first before they joined. "Maybe my memory is wrong, but I don't think hunting a buffalo was ever that difficult," Baraka commented while panting to try and cool down. "You are totally right. Maybe we target the king of the buffalo or something," Makalai said, as he was still lying on the ground near the carcass. "There is no such thing," Roku said, in barely a voice. The rest of his mouth was busy taking in deep breaths. "How many injured?" Baraka asked one of the lionesses. 3 lionesses shed blood but nothing serious," she answered. "That's good," Baraka answered before finally slumping his shoulder. He sighed, tired, but the joy of victory was present in the form of a smile. "Guess we are not young anymore." "Ha ha ha," Makalai laughed. Roku grinned. But then the joyful atmosphere of a successful hunt disappeared in an instant. It was incredible how life could switch up tension and flip the board. One moment, they were sharing a happy moment, and the next, dread consumed their heart. It started with movement in the lake. First thought to be a hippo or a crocodile, it proved to be something worse for the pride. The 3 kings stood up and faced the lake while the females slowly backed away. The smiles on their faces turned into frowns. And out he came from the lake. Leo. The Mbalai brothers finally came face to face with the lion that had been harassing them for the whole week. They were angry and spent most of their waking hours wishing that they could catch Leo in front of them. But now, when he stood right in front of them, they were rooted to the spot. It was the first time Baraka saw a lion bigger than himself. It was the first time Makalai did not want to charge at the enemy. And it was the first time Roku could not hear his thoughts. Leo had a presence that was bigger than his physical size alone. He walked out of the lake in slow steps, water dripping from his fur like thick rivulets. His mane, soaked and dark as night, clung to his neck like a war shroud. His muscles rippled with each movement beneath his coat, giving the impression that he could turn any movement into an explosive attack. It seemed he had been on the lake bed the whole time, submerging his body under water to mask his scent so that he could remain unnoticed. His body, wet and cold was a contrast to the three kings who were sweating and nearly overheating at the moment. In the fight, the one with numerical advantage would also have the advantage of attrition, but in this case, it was in favor of Leo. Leo came forward in a slow stroll. He shook his head a few times to throw away the water stuck on his mane. The action caused it to spread out and frame his face. They looked like dark flames. Leo did not stop his approach and instead quickened his pace until he was running towards them. He did not spare any words for them, did not allow the kings to recover from the exhaustion of the hunt. The three kings roared and growled before exploding forward as well. The battle of dominance began just like that. And Leo might have truly gone overboard with all his preparation and progress. Because what followed next looked like a slaughter rather than a fight. Chapter 75, The Battle for Dominance, Leo vs the Bailai Brothers, 1. First POV. There was no rule in nature, no laws in the wild except the law of the jungle. It was the survival of the fittest. All factors were at play in a fight. I had to learn this the hard way when I first fought Roku and I was put out of the battle because I had eaten right before the fight. That was a lesson I took to heart. Ever since that day, I was acutely aware of these factors that dictate a huge portion of my life whether I wanted it or not. I never made the same mistake again. But it didn't end there. A year later, I had learned to control these factors and turn them to my advantage. I put myself in the best situation. I was full from eating 2 days ago, but I was not bloated, my body was cool and in perfect condition. The wetness that hung on my fur would work to cool me down if the fight went for a long stretch. On the other hand, I forced my enemies into the worst situation. They were starved for weeks, they were mentally tired from lack of proper sleep, and physically, they were exhausted from taking down a buffalo. To add to that, they were all suffering from injuries, minor or otherwise. I also came to attack them when they least expected it by hiding in the water. The scenario could not have been better for me. It was so worth it sitting there in the water for nearly 2 hours straight. The crocodiles were annoying, but at this point, they knew who I was and knew better than to play games with me. And when I finally came out from my hiding spot, I did not waste any time speaking or taunting them otherwise. The language I spoke was straight violence. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins even before the fight started. After a week of preparation, I was mentally and physically ready for this battle. My body also knew from the countless fights I had with the rogue lions when and where to switch to battle mode. I did not need to taste the start of the battle to get into that fighting mode. I ran like I was molded for war. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. 4 lion kings roared at the same exact time, causing vibrations so powerful that they created a wave of sound pressure that washed over the animals in the vicinity and made their instincts go haywire. The crocodiles in the water dived deep into the lake with a splash of movement. The vultures in the sky scattered. The herds of buffalo in the distance flinched back and moved further away from the battlefield. The lionesses of the Syringid pride who were watching and baring their teeth froze and pulled back like guilty criminals. Their teeth covered, claws drawn back, and they lowered their heads. They realized they had no place in this battle. It was the battle of kings, not a place for females to interfere. The battle for dominance had existed since the first lions. This ritual was as old as the species itself. It was a system where the strongest take all and the losers die in vain. This fight was what it meant to be a lion. The 3 brothers exploded out together. They were synced in a way that could only be achieved after fighting countless battles as brothers. They were a trinity, equal in might and power, but combined, they created one absolute force of nature. On the other hand, I fled alone. I was an overwhelming force that accumulated from countless drops of rain. Storms that drowned others only feed me, and this was my outcome. The 2 forces collide. And the brother folded. Just like how they came together as one, they fell together as one. My body drove through their formation and splintered them asunder. 3 against 1, and yet they fell short in numbers. Perhaps 5 of them could bear the force and clash as my equal. I felt a savage grin spread across my lips. It was the kind of grin that came automatically without any intention. I was a tailless lion that had to study other animals to create my own style of movement and techniques. How do you think it would change me when I hunted buffalo for half a year straight? Obviously, I picked up a thing or two from them about being an unstoppable force. The 3 brothers quickly got back from the ground and surrounded me from all sides. I felt myself being in the center of attention. My body did not know which lion to face, so it rotated in wary habit. Give it your best shot. Show me why you three are kings, I taunted, and then with growls that were loud enough to be roars, they charged at me from all sides. I swung my paw at the most eager lion, which was Makalai. The way I threw my paw was more like a slap than an attempt to tear off the face. My paw slammed against the side of his head in a deep thud of force. I did not stop there and quickly spun around using the momentum and turned just in time to meet Baraka, who had lunged at me and was now in mid-air. My hind legs explode. Muscular legs that had to make up for the lack of a tail could generate force unbelievable for a lion. I drove Baraka further into the air. Our chests collided with a force that knocked the air out of my lungs and probably cracked a rib for him. Our jaws met in a raw clash of teeth, and I felt tears and cuts in my exposed gums. The same went for him. It was a brutal exchange that painted both our white teeth red. Baraka reacted instinctively in the air, but I had long since perfected my mid-air maneuver, way back when I met the leopard as a cub. So when we crashed on the ground and opened up the earth, I was on top of him. His white fur got tainted by dirt and blood in his struggle. He tried getting up, but my paw slammed him back on the ground and pinned him there. I pulled back my arm to throw an attack, but Roku blurred behind me. His jaw caught my paw like a dog catching a frisbee. A roar of pain erupted from my throat and I had to move along with his jump so as not to damage my arm further. After landing on the ground, Roku did not release my paw from his jaw. He continued biting and trying to damage my paw. Big mistake. I used his own bite against him by pulling him towards me. His forelegs stayed straight to try and stop, but I easily pulled him with raw strength. His forepaws left a line as he slid towards me. What was the resistance of a lion when the resistance of a dying buffalo barely mattered to me anymore? When I pulled him close to me, my jaw opened wide and then clamped down on his skull. Unfortunately, I could not bite at the back of the skull, so my jaw was not powerful enough to break it. But it was enough to earn a scream of pure agony from Roku. He tried pulling out of my jaw, but I held on like a crocodile. He released the bite he had on my paw, but I didn't pull it out. Instead, my claws came out and pierced his tongue and inner mouth. I then held his jaw with a vice grip and forced him to open his mouth beyond his natural limit. He struggled fiercely. His own claw came up and wrapped around my wrist. He twisted and turned under me, but the bite I had on his head held him in place. I was so focused on my action and my arm shook as I exerted all my strength. The only thing he could do was scream and thrash around in fear and panic as he felt immense pain shoot through his nerves. I felt the two brothers move towards me as fast as they could. Yet it was already too late. A nasty crack was heard as his lower jaw snapped the wrong way. His scream stopped almost abruptly and turned into the whine of a puppy. He would never be able to close his mouth again. It was not a simple dislocation of the jaw, I broke it completely. Now it hung loosely on his face, useless and harmless. He would never bite anything ever again. Even if he survived this battle, he would die soon. I watched him moan and writhe in pain for a second before I turned towards the remaining two brothers. Chapter 76, The Battle for Dominance, Leo vs the Mbalai Brothers, 2. First POV. I left Roku to writhe on the ground while I turned to focus on the other brothers. I looked for Baraka since he was the biggest threat, and that was a miscalculation on my part. In that moment of distraction, Makalai jumped on my back as if to punish me for underestimating him. His full weight crashed against my back, his claws piercing into the thick hide of my shoulders like iron hooks, anchoring himself to me with reckless tenacity. He pulled his head back before his jaw clamped down on the back of my shoulder. I couldn't help roaring out in pain towards the sky. The sheer volume tore through the sky like thunder, loud enough to send the vultures scrambling into the air in a panic of flapping wings and screeches. And before I could react to the attack, a truck slammed into my side. No, not a truck, but Baraka. His giant frame had crashed into me with terrifying momentum. His jaw came flying at my face and I barely dodged him in time. His teeth clamped shut with an audible snap right below my windpipe. Dangerous, that was too dangerous. I bared my fangs and retaliated in kind. I lunged forward and sank my teeth into his face. I did not miss like he did. My bite crushed his mane and peeled back skin with a wet, ripping sound. He roared in pain, but even that didn't matter now. Because what I'd feared had happened. The two brothers were on me like a swarm. They were fighting me like they fought the buffalo not too long ago. This was where the difference in level between a rogue and prime kings really showed. Even though they were tired and injured, when push came to shove, they could really go that extra mile. Even if it killed them, they were willing to do everything to fight back. We thrashed around in a wild wave of violence and instinct. We were a cyclone of muscle and rage. Baraka came at me like the seasoned warrior that he was. He was strong enough to put up a decent fight as we went blow for blow. But ultimately, I was stronger than him. Yet at the same time, with Makalai latched onto my back like a persistent parasite, the clash was about equal. They fought like the wild animals they were, feral, desperate, fast. They moved in chaos, but there was a weird coordination and teamwork in their fight. Makalai shredded my back with his claws, they felt like jagged daggers stabbing into my body. His teeth dug into the muscle near my spine. His weight was a curse. He was hindering my movement and causing an imbalance. I couldn't twist. I couldn't rotate. He anchored me. Baraka took full advantage. He circled around me, searching for weakness and opening before he slammed into me again. We fought for one short, violent moment, and before I could get the upper hand, he would always pull back and I couldn't follow him because of Makalai. He did this repeatedly, coming at me in short bursts of motion. Again and again to cause the most damage. They knew they couldn't win a straightforward fight, so they were changing strategy. They were really taking me on like I was a buffalo or other giant prey. Makalai was dead tired at this point. He barely did anything else other than hang on and latch onto my back. But that alone was enough to distract me while Baraka took me on. So he was the problem. I needed to take him out first. After the end of another engagement with Baraka, I positioned myself forward. Then I exploded out into a jump and landed on my back with a resounding thud. My weight crushed Makalai and I heard the breaking of bones under me. But I was not done. I thrashed around like a crocodile in a death roll. I was doing everything I could to get him off my body. And yet the bastard somehow finds a way to cling to my body. It was like he was possessed. I roared in fury, quickly realizing that I may have made a mistake. Baraka did not let go of the opportunity where I brought myself to the ground out of my own will. He crashed into me with all the force and weight he could generate. He was on top of me in mere moments. His head smashed against mine in a headbutt and then our jaws snapped at each other. Techniques and plans went out the window as we became monsters driven by instincts and will. I bit at his snout. He snapped at my shoulder. Our fangs scraped, tore, and met with bone and blood. The three of us were rolling masses of fury and flesh, writhing and heaving like titans in the dirt. We fought like we were trying to erase each other from existence. To make matters worse, Makalai returned to the fight. His jaw hung loose and his face was drenched in his own blood. But he was still there. He did not know how to get involved in the fight as the three of us rolled around in a chaotic fight, but he was there, waiting and watching. He would strike whenever he found the chance with his claws, ripping across my flanks again and again in search of vengeance. For a moment, it would seem like the three brothers had found a way to victory against me. But that moment would end in a heartbeat as I finally adjusted. The initial plan was to drag the fight and overwhelm them with superior stamina. I would fight them with a clear mind and deal the finishing blows when they got tired. But now I have a better plan. Roar. I surged upward, lifting all three from the ground. Their collective weight could not force me down as I stood up. I could see their eyes going wide due to the sudden explosion of strength. I was not holding back, but I was not going full throttle either to conserve energy. But now that I had a different plan, I didn't hold anything back. I roared with everything I had. It was loud enough to stun my opponents for a moment, and that was all I needed. There were no trees or boulders where I could slam Makalai to get him off my back, so I moved towards the lake. We were fighting at the shore close to the water, so in no time, my paw stepped into the shallow parts of the lake. Makalai roared in protest, but it was too late as I jumped into the water with him on my back. What followed next was a splash of water and an explosion of raw strength. Since I was the one who jumped into the lake, I knew to collect air in my lungs before diving and hold my breath in the water. Makalai was not the same. He was tired and panting constantly. His way of fighting, which was driven by instinct, was not suited to fight underwater. I dragged him into the deeper waters, but before I could reach the appropriate depth, Makalai was already drowning. He let go of his hold on me in an attempt to move back on land, but I dragged him down and never allowed him to surface. His movement became erratic, and the harder he resisted, the quicker he drowned. And then finally, I bit him on the back of his skull. There was a flash of red in the muddy water and he trembled violently before he stilled. On the other hand, the two brothers stood at the edge of the lake. They did not jump into the lake because they knew they would be helpless. Most lions were not like me, they didn't swim to clean themselves or cross rivers just to train. They hated being in the water, they'd drown easily, much like Macaulay. They could not even tell who was who. The only thing they saw was the chaotic splash of water that went on for a few seconds before everything went still. Asterisk splash. Asterisk. I emerged from the lake with a splash of water. The two brothers moved back with a snarl, a natural instinct developed to avoid ambush from crocodiles. But their snarl quickly disappeared to make way for wide, shocked eyes and the deepest frown. I dragged Macaulay's corpse out of the lake and dropped it on the shore among the mud. My body tensed, muscles rippling beneath slicked fur. There was steam coming off my entire body as my body heat evaporated the wetness of my fur. This helped me cool down rapidly. I must have looked like an otherworldly monster in their eyes at that moment. A beast that crawled out straight from hell. One down, I said. My face twisted in fury. Two more. Chapter 77, The Battle for Dominance, Leo vs the Bailey Brothers, 3. First POV. They didn't run. There was no word to describe the emotion I was feeling. Perhaps people should invent a word for the mix between being impressed and disappointed in one's action. On one hand, I was disappointed that the two kings were not like me. They did not consider a tactical retreat as an option. Their ego and pride made them stand their ground and fight even if they knew it was futile to do so. On the other hand, I respected their stubbornness and pride as a lion. They did not move a single inch from their place, even though I smelled fear on them. One down, two more to go, I said while allowing myself a brief rest to cool down. Contrary to what you would expect, neither of them had an emotional outburst upon seeing the corpse of their brother. Roku stared with a hanging jaw and blood-covered face. Baraka closed his eyes and took a deep breath before he focused back on me. There was no grief, no tears, no mourning, no nothing. It was like they had prepared and accepted this situation a long time ago. Like they knew it was only a matter of time before Macaulay was killed by his own recklessness and bravery. What? Are you not going to mourn for your brother's death? Would you not spare even a single tear? I asked, standing up and slowly walking around them. Roku did not reply, he could no longer speak with his shattered jaw. It was Baraka who gave an answer to my question. Every lion has his time. When you rise to become king and reach the pinnacle, the only thing left is the fall. And for us, that was 4 years ago, he said. A long time for stubborn kings to accept the inevitable. I paused briefly, not expecting such words to come out of a wild animal. But I recovered fast and continued walking around them. Will you not run? I asked again. And do what? Come back for vengeance when we are older and you are stronger. He asked back with a humorless laugh. This is our moment, cub. Do what you want and we shall do what we must. He began approaching me. He knew that their defeat was inevitable after Macaulay's death. The fight was as close to a 1vs1 as it could get with Roku's broken jaw. And that was a fight he knew he could not win. But still, he walked towards me. And what is it that you must do? I asked and stopped. I waited for him to close the distance between us. Protect my kingdom, protect my pride, protect my cubs. Do not forget Leo, he said, his eyes seemed to turn white from pure rage and ego. His ears pulled back, and his jaw displayed bloody canines that were ready to tear. I am king. When you knew you were going to die but did not fear death, that was when life became most powerful. Baraka exploded out, a breathing storm with muscle and teeth. He looked bigger than before, and felt many times stronger than before. A fight was a clash of force and will. It was an act of offense and defense driven by the desire to win and the intention to survive. One look at Baraka and you could tell that he was no longer fighting. Baraka was on a bloodlust rampage. His only intention was to wreak destruction upon his enemy, even at the cost of his life. He was not trying to win anymore or survive, he only wanted to kill the enemy. His enemy. Me. I welcomed him with the roar of a lion, proud and daring him to give his best shot at killing me. I had survived worse than the rage of a dying lion, had faced bigger foes than the duty of a king. So come. Asterisk boom. Asterisk. A small shockwave erupted as two of the biggest modern lions clashed in fury. Our arms blurred as we threw strike after strike at each other. Sometimes our attacks cancelled each other out, our limbs tangled in violent rage before we tugged back with enough force to shatter bones. Two jaws with rows of sharp teeth collided. The sound of bone crashing against bone and teeth cutting at teeth could not be hidden under the growls that sounded like a call for more violence. The fight was more brutal than any fight that I had had before. Baraka was losing, he was being overpowered, he was being out-teethed and out-clawed. But strangely enough, he was pushing against me and I was actually backpedaling. If I were to be his end, then Baraka must be embracing death. It became clear from the start who was fighting and who was killing. Baraka did not care about anything other than drawing out my blood. We were standing on our hind legs and exchanging blows. I took one big step backwards and created distance. From there, I threw precise strikes that landed cleanly on Baraka's face. I tore out chunks of flesh and skin. But my enemy seemed to no longer feel pain. I threw another attack at him. My paw whipped forward with the speed of a bullet and the force of a hammer. It was an attack that could kill smaller predators like leopards and hyenas with a single touch. And yet Baraka did not dodge. No, forget dodging, Baraka threw his head towards my paw. His own momentum, along with the force behind my swing, created an unsettling thud. I would expect Baraka to be knocked out with the force alone, but he seemed to absorb the power of my blow and used it to strengthen himself. He then pushed his head downwards, my claws came out and without having to do anything on my part, he tore his face on my claws. But as a result of that, my arm was pushed down and that created an opening at my neck. Baraka exploded upwards and this time, his jaw came straight for my open neck. I didn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. But the bastard actually parried my attack with his face. Was that even a thing? His torn and bloody face was unrecognizable. His fur looked red and not white. But the sight of an opening jaw could not be mistaken. I tucked my chin and met his upward lunge with my own open jaw. Our teeth smashed together, and the sound was like hollow bone hitting hollow bone. Our manes shook violently. He went on with his bite and he managed to tear my lips. I growled, enraged. Baraka pulled back and lunged at me a second time. His aim was still at my neck and I protected myself once more. But then he lunged at me for the third time. This time, he did not come at me with an open jaw but with his forehead. To my utter shock, he headbutted me on my open jaw. He seemed not to know pain as he smashed his skull on my fangs as if trying to knock them off. He created a puncture wound on his head from which blood seeped out like a boil. He was relentless and I found myself actually moving out of the way in fear that he might actually knock off my teeth. He then lunged at the new opening at my neck again. But this time, instead of blocking, I stood upright and put my neck out of his reach. I realized then that it was no use trying to trade blows with an enemy that did not care for his health. My plan changed from knocking him out or killing him to subduing him. My right arm came up and hooked under his armpit. Then I used my experience with wrestling a buffalo on Baraka. I exploded in strength and Baraka spun instantly. I threw him on the ground with a brutal smash. Baraka did not give up. He quickly found a position on the ground. He lay on his back and his forepaws blurred with reckless abandon. He became like a furious tornado on the ground. That is enough, I said and then pushed myself up with my front legs before I crashed back down with all my strength and weight. My paw crushed his ribs upon landing on his side, I heard a clean snap and a choked sound left his nose, and he bled instantly from his nostrils. He seemed to finally feel the pain this time as he froze completely. Right then, I lunged forward and bit down on his neck. His thick skin and thicker mane protected him from the sharpness of my fangs, but I clamped down tightly. It was the same technique I used to kill the buffalo with a hide that I could not penetrate. Suffocate them to death. The immense bite force I acquired through years of training and conditioning came in use. Baraka could not escape from my jaw, no matter how hard he tried. In the end, his limbs waved wildly and he tried to push himself off me. He did not care that he was tearing his own skin by pushing me away. If it meant getting out to fight another second, he was willing to skin himself alive. I heard his skin tear like fabric, but I also clamped down on flesh so he could not escape. I gathered up every bit of strength I could find and exploded in power. My muscles popped with raw strength and I lifted the 300-kilogram lion off the ground. My eyes turned white with rage and effort, and I lost my vision for a moment as I became raw strength. I slammed his body on the ground after lifting him up. There was a small explosion on the ground. It sounded like the end of the fight, but that was only the beginning. I found out the limit of my strength in that moment. I lifted Baraka off the ground again and this time I slammed him to my left. Before he could recover from the crash, I lifted him again and slammed him down on the right. Before he could tell where he was, I lifted again and slammed him down on another part of the ground. I ragdolled him like that for a long time. My stamina seemed endless as I literally beat him with the earth. Again and again, the earth quaked and broke Baraka into pieces. His limbs, which were trying to catch him upon falling, snapped the wrong way. His broken ribs shattered upon being smashed endlessly on the ground. His neck was broken, his spine was broken, his paws were broken and hung loosely on his wrist. I stopped only when it felt like I was smashing a lifeless doll on the ground. There was no longer any resistance. Boom. I smashed his body for the final time on the ground. His back seemed to make cracks on the ground. My jaw tightened even more on his neck and I pushed him against the muddy earth. I created a giant scar on the ground and then I dragged his body forward. His body craved a line as his skin scraped off. I walked him on the ground for a few meters before I finally lifted him back up. This time, I did not smash him again but held him there in the air. He hung limply from my jaw like a used rag. The seconds ticked by and there was no longer any movement, even as I waited. Finally, I released my jaw. Baraka's giant body fell limply on the ground like a sack of potatoes. I felt clarity return to my mind and my muscles ached and groaned due to the strain immediately. I took a few seconds to recover and then... 2 down. I said while panting heavily. Only one more. Chapter 78, The Battle for Dominance, Leo vs the Bailai Brothers, 4. First POV. It began with you. I said as I turned to face Roku, standing a few meters away. And now it ends with you. I made a slow approach towards him. Each of my breaths came out rough, like the sound of an engine, and my steps were firm and deliberate. He remained rooted on his spot, knowing that he could do nothing but accept the fate he had been dealt with. He did not even try to help his brother Baraka when we fought and instead chose to let him have his final moment of honor and pride. Not like he could do anything with his broken jaw anyway. A lion that could not bite was just a waste of space and would have just hindered Baraka during the intense fight. The sad thing about being a thinker and the smartest among his brothers was that he saw all of this coming. He knew they were not coming out of this alive. Perhaps he had known that for days now. Do you remember? I said and stopped in front of him. My height and size dwarfed him, making him look weaker and more pathetic than he already was. I said I would kill you. There was a year delay but my words stayed true. Roku stared into my eyes with the kind of stubbornness and ego that only a lion could have. It didn't matter what state he was in, there was no defeat in his eyes. The fight was as good as over. Roku could do nothing anymore. If he had been in his best condition, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. With the state he was currently in, he could do less than nothing. So I did not end him instantly. It didn't matter either way. I could show him mercy in that moment and he would still die in a few days. Any last words? I asked. It was a bad attempt at a joke because obviously, he wouldn't have any last words. He couldn't speak anymore. But much to my surprise, Roku talked. He was not able to say coherent words but I could still understand him vividly. Perhaps it was because what he said was the same thing my inner voice said in a hidden corner of my mind. Enjoy while this lasts, your time will come too, he said, all kings must fall and I will watch yours with glee. Somehow, that really got under my skin. He knew the worst thing to say to me, even right before his death. I roared in fury and burst forward, aiming for his neck. But the hanging jaw got in the way, so I tore that right off his face. He staggered back with blood flooding out from his face and onto the ground. His throat produced a gurgling noise, and then he lunged at me with the final fight in his spirit. I sidestepped his lunge and then caught the back of his neck with my jaw. I clamped down hard and then, with a brutal jerk of my movement, I broke his neck just like that. There was a nasty crunch. I could almost taste his broken bone. Then I opened my jaw and his body fell down limply like the corpse he was, and that was the end of the battle. A moment of silence passed while I stared at the corpse. Then I turned to look at the sky. I noticed hundreds of vultures circling overhead. They were releasing twisted caws and screeches as if to celebrate my victory. I looked beyond the flock of birds and saw the dark clouds swirling further in the sky. It looked like it would rain any moment. After that, I looked around me. I spared a glance towards the Syringid pride that stood frozen in a deafening silence. Then I looked at the 3 human vehicles that were standing on the edge of the horizon. I spared a short glance at the corpses of Makalai and Baraka respectively. A crocodile sneaked out from the lake and quickly dragged Makalai's corpse into the water. I watched it happen but did nothing else. That was simply nature happening before my eyes. It is done, I have conquered the land, I thought to myself while trying to process the surreal feeling in my heart. The first drop of rain hit me, snapping me out of my strange reverie. A sparse shower of raindrops followed before that turned into a great downpour in seconds. I stood under the rain and so did everyone else. It felt like the world was crying, like it was mourning the end of a great dynasty. Indeed, what a strange feeling it was. To put an end to a whole legacy. The storm rained heavily and briefly. It was like the Serenity was washing away the final marks left by the Bailai brothers to leave a new and fresh slate for me to start over and paint in my image. It was a moment of rebirth. Their time was over and now it was my time. I roared towards the sky as the rain stopped right after. I did not stop with just a single roar, I continued declaring my victory and decree for as long as my body would allow me. The females of the Syringid pride lowered their heads and moved away from the silent battlefield. I continued to roar still, I was captured in that moment of glory. The sky cleared up and the sun shone brilliantly upon my image. The sun reflected my growing pride that was getting bigger and more intense with every passing second. My roar echoed, unchallenged and uninterrupted. For I am king. Third POV. Tears fell from the eyes of the human researchers who had witnessed everything happening on the screen of the cameras. In fact, they had seen more than they wanted to see. It was a powerful moment. The sheer volume of Leo's roar shook their entire body, even though they stayed far away. It would take everyone, including the land itself, to get used to the roar that was starkly different from the roars of the Bailai brothers. The researchers who had focused on studying the Bailai brothers were having the worst breakdown. They hugged each other and the women could not help but sob out loud. It was such a brutal end to a legacy that it broke everyone's heart. A single lion tore down the might of three. Suffice it to say some of the humans had grown attached to the Bailai brothers and the Syringid pride as a whole. Therefore, to see such an intense event was quite traumatizing for them. The vehicle with the researchers led by Dr. Tonson was faring a lot better than others. They were silent in respect but they were not crying. Far from it, some of them could barely hide the smile on their faces. In fact, if the possible end of that conflict is either Leo's death or the Bailai brothers' death, then they would admit that they preferred the death of the Bailai brothers. Alright everyone, it seems our job will also be entering a new phase. All the resources and manpower would be focused on our lion Leo from now on, Dr. Tonson said while rubbing his palms together. You are wrong, Doctor, Ramirez said while looking into his camera. It's King Leo now, he said. He was taking the best possible photos and videos of the historical event in Leo's life. In later years, these photographs would become one of the most liked photos and impactful image on the internet. It has a nice ring to it, Hannah said, her eyes looking bright despite just witnessing what was probably the most brutal fight of dominance between lions. Normally, it was rare to see death in a battle for dominance since the loser would usually run away to survive. But Leo killed all three kings in this battle. And this was not only a testament to Leo's brutality and strength but also the unwavering will of the three kings. Perhaps their legacy had come to an end but they would always be remembered as the three kings who did not run from the legendary Lion King Leo. Hannah showed a small smile while watching Leo continue to roar and declare his authority. Leo, the Lion King. Asterisk roar. Asterisk. Image. Author, some of you are confused by the goal. It was 2,000 more stones, meaning 4,000 stones in total. And we missed that mark by 300 plus stones. Insane amount though, haha. I had to make sure you don't fuck with me again. But this puts an end to the fight, so no more cliffhangers. Thanks for reading the story and see you guys tomorrow. Throw stones if you have some, or not. Greed knows no bound and I'm pretty sure we are already set for number 1 for the week. Chapter 79, The Syringid Pride, 2. Third POV. The Bailai brothers and the Syringid pride which they led, was a legendary phenomenon unlike anything the world had ever seen. With a total of around 30 members and 16 adult lionesses, the Syringid pride was like 3 prides in a coalition. They were triple the size of the average lion pride. The sheer dominance of this pride made it so that they occupied a land that should be shared among 4 or more lion prides. Indeed, they were a band of lions that was worth studying. The pride was shared by a coalition of 3 brothers lions, but there was also a kind of order and clear separation among them. Especially when it came to the lionesses and the kings who preferred them. The 3 brothers have females they favored under them. Roku had 5, Makalai also had 5, and Baraka had 6. Roku's females were 1 Nia, 2 Tala, 3 Ishaba, 4 Nydia, 5 Imani. Makalai's females were 1 Kali, 2 Asha, 3 Leela, 4 Zalina, 5 Zuri. Baraka's females were 1 Amara, 2 Nima, 3 Sana, 4 Eshe, 5 Kezia, 6 Salima. All 3 brothers had females of their own, but that is not to say that there was no crossbreeding. The females were still a shared property, and one brother could mate with the female associated with another brother. These groups and separation mostly emerged as time went on and the females chose the king they preferred and the kings chose them back. The character and personality of the females also had much to do with it. For example, Roku's females were known to be great hunters. Makalai's females were known to be on the younger side and were fierce and fertile. On the other hand, Baraka's females were on the older side, 3 of them were even older than him. But the pride did not end with just the lionesses. Among the members of the pride, 10 of them were cubs, and there were 6 sub-adult lions, 4 of them being males. 3 to 8 months old, 6 cubs, about the same age as when Leo fought a leopard and Scar's takeover. 8 to 14 months old, 4 cubs, Leo's first training arc age. 1.5 to 3.5 years old, 2 females, sub-adult, 4 males, ready to be kicked out. In total, the Syringid pride was around 30 members strong. 32 members to be specific, but that number changes rather quickly with deaths and births. The victorious roar of Leo continued to thunder across the sky, echoing in the plains and among the hills like a new command that must be heeded. It sounded like a storm without rain. The female hunters who had set out to hunt a buffalo along with the kings were slowly making their way back to the rest of the pride. Their heads hung low, burdened by thoughts and emotions. 9 females in total had set out to hunt while the rest stayed behind to protect the cubs. The injuries, the cuts, and the bruises sustained from the intense buffalo hunt were long forgotten as a heavier concern weighed on their heart. No one spoke. Not a single voice all the way home. It felt like a nightmare. The way Leo tore apart their great kings felt like a nightmare. It couldn't be real. It must not be real. But the relentless roar echoing in the sky always pulled them out of their disbelief and anchored them to the cruel reality. A reality where their beloved kings lay dead and eaten by vultures and crocodiles. When they saw the rest of the pride, the hunters lowered their heads even more. They felt trapped by the fact that they now had to confront the reality of the situation. Mom! Mother! Mom! The cubs came running, with smiles on their faces, excitement on their feet. Now the adults felt like vomiting when they saw their innocent smiles. They were so young they did not even know what was coming for them. The other adults, on the other hand, knew what was happening. They had heard the new roar, and they could see from the returning hunters that something bad had happened. Something that should be impossible had happened. The cubs came to a stop in front of the hunters. They stumbled cutely, sometimes tripping over each other or crashing into each other. They were still getting used to running and stopping. Mom! One cub asked with a tilted head, "What's going on?" They might be a little slow, but they were not foolish either. They knew how to read the room, and when every adult had their tail between their legs and their ears drooping down, even their young mind could tell that something was very wrong. Nydia could not find the courage to talk to her son. How could she possibly tell him that his father was humiliated and killed in the most ruthless way possible? It was not just Nydia. No adults wanted to break the tragic news to them. Instead, they leave them to their own devices, hoping they will figure things out on their own by watching them. The king's lost, Nydia said while walking past the cubs and talking to the adults who stood further behind them. How can that be? The adults came forward. Eshe was one of the oldest lionesses, so she took charge of the situation. You didn't help them? She asked, already knowing that the Mbalai brothers could not have lost in any ordinary situation. She was correct to assume. But what she didn't expect was that this extraordinary situation was one single lion. It was 3 against 1. Nydia answered with a snarl, yet they all fell, King Roku, Baraka, and Makli. No one survived. Was it him? Eshe asked, and everyone knew who she was talking about. The pride was aware of the lion that took on the 3 kings 6 months ago, and they had also heard the roars of challenge that hunted the kings over the week. Yes, Nydia answered. You could hear a sharp intake of air from the adults around. After that, all hell broke loose among the pride. The hunters informed the adults about what exactly had taken place in the battle. Running away was not an option since that was not something they should do. The only thing they could do was prepare for this new king. Do you think he will show mercy? Eshe asked one of the hunters who had seen the battle. No, Tala answered while she recalled how ruthless Leo was against the 3 kings. She had never laid eyes on such a monster before, and she made this clear. The worst case scenario has happened, she added. The Lionesses could not help but feel betrayed by the failure of the kings that were meant to protect them. How could they fall at the might of only one? They had heard stories about Leo before. No one really cared back then, assured of their safety under the three brothers. But now, those stories came back to their mind. The evil lion that killed for fun. The one that roamed the unwanted parts to the Serenity and ruled the harsh lands. Hide the cubs, protect them, Eshe roared out, and the lionesses got into formation. They prepared themselves to greet their new king. Everything was in a frenzy. The transition between the old kings to a new king was always chaotic. But it was even more so due to the drastic situation and the sheer size of the pride. An hour passed just like that, and finally, he came to claim what was his. Chapter 80, Takeover. First POV. I roared until my voice was gone. And by the end, I was completely refreshed. There was no anger inside me anymore, no adrenaline or the desire to kill something. I only felt peace and the cooling sensation of my body. It was like the calm you felt after an intense workout. The world seemed so gentle in that moment. The intensity and brutality of the battle made the normal world feel so kind. I took that moment to check on myself. I noticed that I was feeling mild aches in some places and I had sustained scratches and punctures on my skin, but there was no serious injury. I had flawlessly executed my plan. After I was done checking on myself, I looked around at my surroundings. The vultures that had flown overhead had landed on the ground. They numbered in the hundreds and were eating the corpses of the fallen kings. I stared at the scene for a while before I heard a flap of wings beside me. There was only one vulture in the world that would ever get this close to me. You did it, my lord, Grimm said as he landed beside me. I did, I said with a smile, liking that short sentence very much. How was the food? They tasted disgusting, he said. Grimm had been spoiled with fresh and delicious meat for a year now, so he was picky. But the chance of eating a king comes once in a lifetime, so I had to take a piece for myself, he said. I nodded at his words but remained silent. Meanwhile, I continued looking at the scene before me, my thoughts stretching into unimportant things. Something wrong, my lord? Grimm asked with a tilt of his head. Just pondering on what Roku said in his final moments, I answered honestly, that could be me in the future. Perhaps it would take a few years or a decade, but eventually, I will fall just like they. Grimm widened his eyes a bit before turning to look at the scene before us. He looked at the vultures tearing and pecking away at the fallen kings with a new perspective in his eyes. Perhaps he imagined my body in their place, just like I was doing. No, he said suddenly with surprising conviction. No vultures or any other creature will disrespect you like that. I will make sure of it. I laughed out loud. I am serious, my lord, Grimm said, the resolve and conviction in his voice made my laugh die down. Even if only time itself makes you fall, vultures can live twice as long as lions. A starving bird will not get your hair. I glanced at him, only noticing now that he was larger than any other vultures around. Maybe fulfilling his words was a stretch for a single bird, but his spirit alone was enough to move my heart. Thank you, Grimm. I said. I am happy to serve, he replied. A short silence followed as we both reflect on our one-year journey. The first time I met him was vivid in my mind. And now here we are. So, I trailed thoughtfully, what next? I never really thought this far ahead in my plan. The end of all my plans and strategy was my ultimate victory against the Bailai brothers. I never really thought about what to do after my win. Of course, returning to the Pride Lands was part of my life goals, but that was still 1 year into the future according to my promise. So what should I do in the time before that? I think this is the part where you mate with the females and have babies, Grimm suggested in a not-so-sure voice, and then enjoy life, I guess. Becoming the king was the ultimate life goal for a lion. There could never be anything greater and more fulfilling than that. It meant that I had completed life as a lion. Right, I nodded, I have a pride now. I realized I wanted nothing but this all my life. I had prepared for years for this, but it still felt like it happened suddenly. I could never be ready for it. I guess I should greet my new pride, I said, and then turned towards the direction of the pride. They were close by. They were close enough that I could smell them from here. And so I walked towards the location of the pride. Grimm immediately took to the sky and flew towards the location before me so that he could scout and tell me again what to expect before I reached there. On my way, I gathered my thoughts for the task ahead instead of pondering about useless questions. I had no experience in taking over a pride, and the only example that I could look to was Scar's takeover of the pride. Which, I must admit, was anything but a good example or tradition. Scar's takeover of the pride was not because he earned it but because there were no other lions to become king. This caused much resentment and dissatisfaction from the lionesses, and Scar had to starve us and forcefully make us submit to him. But it was different for me. I had earned the kingdom and the pride fair and square against 3 prime kings. There was no debate or doubt that I was the undisputed king. So I hoped for a seamless takeover where the pride would accept me as their king without further conflict. But as I watched Grim return faster than I thought, I knew that my hope would not come to pass. If the vulture returned, it usually meant that something was not as it should be. "They are preparing to fight," Grim said, and he landed on my back. "A fight?" I asked. "For what purpose?" "I think they are trying to protect the cubs." 3 lionesses had moved further away from the pride and were hiding the young cubs under a bush, he said. "And the rest?" "They are waiting for you," Grim said, "but they wait in a battle formation. They pick the tall grasses to meet you, where it is hard to keep an eye on all the adults. I believe they hope to sneak up on you in case things turn south." I hummed calmly in acknowledgement. In the meantime, I was trying to suppress a growing anger and annoyance by justifying their action. Of course, they would be wary of me from the start. But the sheer audacity to try to deny my claim on them, a claim I rightfully earned. It was hard to view that kindly. A low growl came out. "They must think they are so clever, when in fact their actions speak otherwise," Grim said with a shake of his head before he jumped off my back and flew back into the sky. A few minutes of slow and deliberate steps later, I saw the lionesses waiting for me among the tall grasses just like Grim had told me. His other information also stayed true as the females stood in a formation. They stood in a semicircle where they could attack me from all sides as I approached them. The smell of the females was distinctive, and I smelled more females than my eye could see, meaning some of them stayed hidden among the grass. "Is this how you greet your king?" I asked while I continued to approach them with absolutely zero hesitation. At my question, I saw the females looking towards the direction of the formation. I followed their gaze and locked eyes with 3 lionesses that stood at the very center of the formation. From the way the others looked at them for a reaction, I could tell that they were the leaders or, at the very least, the females at the top of the pride hierarchy. So I made my way towards them. "Forgive us for being wary of the new king we barely know," one of them said with barely hidden sarcasm. But I didn't take it the wrong way. Not at all. How could I, when I knew that each and every one of them was completely terrified? The sarcasm was a cheap attempt at hiding her fear. They were so scared that it didn't even make sense. The growing anger and annoyance disappeared and were replaced by confusion. I was not the villain here. Was I? Oh wait, I just brutally murdered their 3 kings. Maybe I was a villain from their perspective. Like Scar's takeover, but worse. Oh, I was so much worse in that context. Interesting. Then let us quickly get familiar with ourselves. "Tell me your names," I asked, and finally stood before them. Females were small. They were noticeably smaller compared to the average lion, and standing before me, they were barely half my size. I felt like I could tear them up and murder them by accident. The females swallowed hard, hoping they could hide the slight tremble of their legs among the grass, but I noticed. "My name is Eshe," the lioness in front of me said. "My name is Ishiba," the one standing left to Eshe said. "Nydia," the one standing on the right said. "My name is Salima," another one said, and that was when I stopped them. "That is enough for now, I can't remember all of you at once, so let's do it step by step," I said. Those 4 were important names as they were the highest ranking among the pride. The rest of the pride, I could learn their names at a later time. I moved away from them and walked along their curved formation. I also spotted the few lionesses crouching down and hiding under the tall grasses. I strode back and forth until I inspected every last one of them. A total of 15 females were present at that moment, including 2 sub-adults. But I knew that that was only half of the members of the Syringet Pride. "My name is Leo, son of King Mufasa," I said, a bit surprised that I mentioned Mufasa when I introduced myself. Perhaps I wanted them to know of my royal lineage. "And I am your new king," I said, and finally stopped near the 4 females again. "Now, where is the rest of my pride?" I asked, and some flinched back due to my rising tone. "And where are the cubs?" The air chilled in that moment. My instincts tugged at me. There was a nature in me, the nature of a lion that raged at the mere mention of cubs of another lion. I guess this was what would make me kill them. The females rolled their shoulders and their teeth were half bared. I could feel them loading up their muscles, ready to spring out at any moment. Think, my voice cut through the tension easily due to the fact that I did not give a fuck about what they were about to do. They truly pose no threat to me. Think carefully about your next action, I said, and a deep growl rolled off my throat and spread around like an earthquake. I flashed my fangs with a twitch of my lips. These were the same teeth that were still red from the blood of their kings. A heavy silence hung in the air. I could hear their quickening heartbeats. Eventually, some of the females broke under the pressure. I noticed that most of them were either young or on the older side. They came to me with slow steps and lowered heads. They broke the battle formation and took their place beside me. I grinned when I saw the face of betrayal flash on the lionesses that remained in their place. I guess I knew which ones were mothers and which were not. The same thing happened when Scar tried to kill the cubs after his takeover. The lionesses with cubs fought to the bitter end while the ones without cubs were the easiest to fold and adapt to the new rule. The others are staying behind those trees and near the bushes, one of the lionesses who came beside me said. I turned to her and remembered her scent and face. She looked young, almost too young. I assumed she was still a subadult, one that had not borne cubs. This one is wise beyond her years, I said with a chuckle and then moved towards the said location. I already knew where it was, but I appreciated her willingness to cooperate. Grim was already circling above the place, so it could not be missed. I walked right past the formation, and no one could do anything. I had already intimidated them and made nearly half of them join my side. The location was not far away, so in a few seconds, I could already see the lions trying their best to lie low behind the trees and among the grass. I caught a glimpse of males with half a mane and small cubs that were too curious for their own good. I roared at them, specifically, I roared at the 4 young males. When said young lions did not run immediately after my first roar, I charged at them. It seemed I was not fully done with fighting. I still had some young bloods to kill or some more to kick out of the pride.
Thanks for listening.